What's the worst time that somebody stabbed you in the back? My friend was dating a girl who I could just tell didn't like me. But at least we were civil to one another until the camping trip on the May 24th holiday weekend. She was adamant about keeping our alcohol separate, and that was fine. I had my beer, they had their Mike's Hard Lemonades, everything's fine. Then I got up early on the first morning and I made pancakes for everyone. Why? Because that's just how I roll. When the campers rolled out of their tents to the smell of apple cinnamon pancakes and campfire coffee, she was the only one to flip out. I'd gone into her cooler and used her margarine. My buddy just looked pained and tried to keep the peace as I tossed her a toonie and apologized. Her reaction was to grab a lock from his gym bag and lock their tent with their booze and their food. Later, he came to me and asked if he could borrow the car so that they could run into town, get some protection, and have some words about being a bit easier with the other campers. I said, okay, and handed him the keys. When they returned, hours later, the tank was empty, and the field kitchen, a wooden box with straps called a wanigan with plates, cutlery pots and pans and stuff, was missing from the back of the station wagon. We searched the camp. Nothing. It was my dad's and had been handed down in the family for generations. I drove off to fill the tank and buy a new tub of margarine and was halfway down the country road when I saw the wanigan on the side of the road smashed in the ditch. There were marks along the back panels besides the flattened down seats where one of them had clearly pushed it out the back of the moving car. After piling it all, stunned, piece by piece back into the wagon, I gassed up and drove back and then packed up. Not a word was said by anyone until I tore up the camping permit and peeled out with their shouts behind me in the dust. Never spoke to either one of them again. My former best friend, college and med school roommate, slept with and knocked up my ex-wife while I was deployed on the USS Nimitz, a big aircraft carrier, for 6 months. Plus those two idiots frickin' wrecked and almost destroyed the 1965 Ford Thunderbird that my grandfather passed down to me. I knew it was going to be a good divorce proceeding when the judge kept referring to me as Commander Jacobs, sir, during the hearings. He was a former junior JAG officer, doing a total restore and modernization of the car, no longer on the Nimitz, and the Navy is awesome, at least for me. Watch the PBS documentary called Carrier. It's a really good look at life on an aircraft carrier. I had a friend who broke into my house, slashed my couch, and stabbed me with a fork. She was convinced I was sleeping with her boyfriend. He was one of my good high school friends. I'd introduced them. Not that you should just be resorting to violence like this to begin with, but why do these paranoid nutjobs always go after the outside party and not their partner? Did they think that their lousy cheating partner is going to stop being that way just because the current object of his affection is gone? Although it sounds like this guy was innocent anyway. I was in what I later realized was a very bad relationship, but at the time this guy was like religion to me. I was crazy about him. My best friend at the time was sort of a mean girl, but I wasn't very good at making friends, so I put up with her being cruel to people. She'd never do anything to hurt me, right? Anyway, that relationship started getting real nasty, but I kept with it because, I was young and stupid. I convinced myself that if I tried a little harder, everything would just fix itself. It didn't, and after a few months, we broke up. Sometime later, I was at a party and my, quote, friend was a bit drunk. She told me, laughing the entire time, how she and this idiot were sleeping with each other 2 weeks after he and I had started dating. She details about how they'd do the deed while he was talking to me on the phone and then laugh about it. She went into detail on all of the ways and places they used to sneak around to sleep with each other. And this was the girl I'd cry to when my ex would hurt me. She didn't seem to have any idea that what she was saying was effed up. She actually thought that I would think it was funny as well. 11 years ago, my husband had a bone marrow transplant. While we were in this big city for this, 3 months, we had friends and family taking up donations and paying our bills with them. One of these friends kept the money for herself and let our bills go into arrears. When I found this out, my husband was basically fighting to live through the worst part of the recovery process of a bone marrow transplant. It made me sick. I had one friend that would steal from other friends pretty regularly. One time I held a small social gathering, we're talking 6 or 7 people, and my new smartphone just went missing. This jerk helped me look for my phone in my house for over an hour. Later on, I see my phone in his room on his desk. I just took it back, no words were exchanged. I just stopped talking to him altogether after that. Later, he was at a mutual friend's party. Her 80GB iPod goes missing. Me and some other friends were suspicious that it was him, so the next day we called up the local pawn shop and described the iPod. The pawn shop guy said he got one that day. Sure enough, it was under Scumbag's name. Pawnshop owner offered to call the cops, and we declined. We approached Scumbag and told him we knew. He tried to deny it, but we managed to shame him into admitting it. At the time, we thought we were taking the high road or something, being merciful, teaching him a lesson. But then later on, he moved in with some people that I knew, and I was talking to them after the Scumbag had moved out, and they said stuff was going missing all the time in the house. And that stopped after he moved out. It was mostly just green herb or small amounts of money, but it's still pretty irritating. Maybe if we did call the cops, that wouldn't have happened. Oh well, he's friendless now. Hopefully one day he'll realize that you can't steal from friends and still expect them to remain friends. Screw people that steal from friends. In high school, I was in love with one of my best friends. I'll call her Jackie. Jackie and I had dated a little bit right before prom when I found out she was screwing my other best friend, who I'll call Sam. Turned out that they were going to prom together and had planned never even coming to pick me up. I confronted him about it and he spread rumors around the school that I smacked Jackie around and had been giving her massive self-esteem issues. I found this out when arriving to the prom and had a mob of people drag me behind a hotel and beat me until I couldn't scream anymore. Nobody ever believed that they lied, so I joined the Navy to get away instead of going to the college I'd planned on with my friends. Oof. This person saw somebody giving me a hug and then went and told everyone I was cheating on my fiancée. Our wedding was going to be at the cheater's house and the backlash was devastating. We cancelled the wedding and got married at the courthouse. My relationship with both of them has changed forever. Ugh, yeah, my husband went out one night several years ago with some people from his work. One of them I was sort of friends with as well. Then this dude texted me at like 1 a.m. telling me that my husband was going home with some random bar girl and asked if I needed company since I was supposedly so upset. I declined and happily greeted my husband about 30 minutes later when his cab showed up, and we exchanged, "That guy is such an idiot," stories the next morning. Never heard from that sorta friend again, happily. As roommates in college, we purchased furniture and electronics for the house. The agreement being that when we graduated and moved out, that one would buy the other one out. The day comes when my roommate begins packing up for his new job in another city. I say my goodbyes and head to work for the day. I return 8 hours later to an empty house. The D-bag took everything he could. Oh, and I'll answer some of the questions I'm getting. I talked to him the day previous about what was going on with who. I wrote him a check the night before. The check was waiting for me on the fridge when I got home. As for legal recourse, I had no receipts or any way to prove I'd bought any portion of our shared items, so I was kind of stuck in that regard. It was very much a teachable moment to me. Looking back, I probably should have seen something like this coming. I'd cashed in my birthday and Christmas presents chit with my folks to get him a plane ticket to New York City for New Year's. When he gave me a video game and I didn't get him anything, he tried to hold that over my head for a while. Finally, about 2 years after all this happened, he had contacted my folks and asked for money. What for, I have no idea. My best friend and best man at my wedding offered me a job as a restaurant manager for $3,000 salary per month. As soon as my family moved there and signed the lease on our new place, he gave the job to somebody else and put me in the dish room. He expected me to work overtime every week, and when I told him I deserved to be paid for overtime, he called it Chinese overtime. I got even by waiting for the orders to pile up when he wasn't there, and then I walked out. I found out later that he did all of that because his wife wanted me to join the two of them in the bedroom and I'd refused. My son was born with a serious congenital heart defect and underwent open heart surgery when he was only 2 weeks old. My best friend at the time said he was coming to the hospital to visit us. I'd known this guy for years, been in his wedding, and been in third world countries on humanitarian missions with him. We were close. The guy said he was coming down that afternoon, but he never showed. I called to see if he was still coming and got his voicemail. I never heard from him again. Found out that my friend thought that my son deserved the heart defect because he was conceived out of wedlock. Jesus frickin' Christ. Well, that gentleman certainly deserves a heart defect for behaving like that. Anyone got a spare one sitting around that we can send him? It's not just the utterly crappy beliefs and blaming an innocent child, it's also just being so two-faced and manipulative about it, and inflicting the most confusion and upset possible at what was already no doubt one of the hardest times of the parents' lives. While freelancing on a sweet gig that came out of the blue, I found out that I'd be working with Sean, a guy who was in my group at a former ad agency. Awesome, a friendly face. Sean was a geek. Nobody likes him, and as his associate creative director and supervisor, I looked out for him. He seemed to try hard, and I didn't understand why everyone excluded him. During 2 rounds of layoffs, I went to bat for the guy and saved his job, promising to work with him. He was always busy, and soon after I moved on to a new job. So I looked forward to working with him some more and proving those mean jerks from our old agency wrong. While working this freelance job, I sensed something was wrong soon after it began. Sean had no ideas. None. He literally brought a blank pad in day after day. Excuses were that he was tired, the assignment confused him, stuff like that. This made me nervous, but I was stuck with him. So, since we were on a team, I shared my ideas, our only ideas, with him. We had to present an hour after lunch. During lunch, I had to go to a doctor's appointment with my wife, who was seriously ill. On my way back to the office, the cab I was in had an accident. A jerk in a Lexus slammed into us. Nobody was hurt, but it totaled both cars. Further, I didn't feel comfortable leaving the cabbie, as he was foreign and spoke little English. The guy who hit us was ranting, so I stayed to give a statement to the police, and called Sean to explain and asked if he minded handling the meeting, and asked him to relay my situation. Then, the prick presented my work, claimed it was all his, and they sent me home because Sean nailed it. The salt in the wound? It took 9 months to get paid for the time I did put in. All along I tried to explain, but nobody believed me. He copied my notes in his own writing and submitted them as proof. As far as they were concerned, I was riding this guy's coattails. I could have kicked him in the pants for a week without getting bored. 2 months later, he was found out when he tried it again. Dozens of former co-workers called to rub my nose in it. You still think we were just picking on Sean? I learned that sometimes people are shunned because they deserve it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. He stole my fiancée from me and just married her using the ring that yours truly bought her. Profile picture now features her holding her hand up with that ring, and everybody is pretending that he bought it. My wife left me when my cancer came back. The opposite happened to my cousin. He had cancer and his wife was seeing someone else, just waiting for him to die. When he went into remission, she yelled at him for basically keeping the life insurance money from her, and she divorced him. My buddy introduced me to a lady friend of his at a party. I took an interest in her and asked my buddy if he was cool with me asking her out, and he told me to go for it. She and I had what I thought was a great date. My buddy called me the next day to tell me that the lady wasn't interested and couldn't see a way to let me down gently, so she'd asked him to tell me to break all contact. About 2 months later, I was drunk dialing various folks and decided to call the lady up and ask her why she had blown me off. She said that my buddy had told her that I wasn't interested and that I wouldn't be calling her anymore. I'd find out later that my buddy had done all of what he did because he worked with her and had a huge crush on the girl, but knew that he wouldn't ever be able to get together with her and felt that when I asked him for his okay, I'd put him on the spot and he couldn't find the courage to ask me to back off. Once everything was out in the open, we made plans to go out again, but didn't inform my friend that we had uncovered the deception. That was tough to do though because I was thoroughly teed off. I avoided the guy for the next month, ignoring phone calls and things. He found out about it when I came to pick her up at work one night. Nobody said a word, he just looked at us like we had crushed his soul. It had actually been her idea to do this, and I was gleefully happy with the idea of doing it until after I'd actually done it. And then a really weird thing happened. My relationship with this lady became all about getting revenge on my friend. Whenever there was a silent moment between us, she'd break it by reminding me of what a jerk he'd been. A few weeks into it, she'd break the silence by telling me embarrassing stories about him. It seemed like the only thing we really had in common was that we were angry at my friend. I broke it off after about 2 months. It would be several more months until I patched things up with my friend. I ran into him at one of the local bars, and after a talk about bros before the other thing, it was all patched up. This isn't my worst story, but it's definitely the weirdest. I lived with this crazy girl a few years back. She was a fun roommate, but her crazy got pretty old fast. She decided to move out, which was great because I was done with her drama and really wanted the place to myself. My first night in the place by myself was fantastic. It was quiet and clean, and I couldn't wait to fall asleep. I crawled into bed and pulled my comforter over me. But my comforter felt weird. It felt almost flat. Well, that didn't make sense because I had a very expensive fluffy down comforter. I checked under my duvet cover, and that witch had switched out my comforter with her dirty, nasty Walmart one. Who the frick steals somebody's comforter? They tried to ruin all of my relationships because he wanted to sleep with them. and tried to sabotage my current relationship for laughs. That's pretty much it. Back in high school, I don't know if he really hated me or was jealous of me, but he'd sabotage any relationship or potential connection with lies, saying I'd cheat on her like I did with the rest of them. I've never cheated in my life. And then try to convince them to sleep with him, and from what I hear, he never succeeded in that part. Then at his high school graduation party, I met his cousin. We both had a mutual attraction and tried to start something. Again, he told her the same lies, which squashed any hope of a relationship. We remained friends, but she believed her cousin over some guy she'd just met, which I guess makes sense. After that, I stopped being friends with him because that's when I learned all the rumors came from him. 4 years later, she finally got over the lies and fears, and now we're dating. As for him, I saw him a year ago when he showed up to start a fight. Apparently, I slept with his wife 2 years before they met, and that made him angry. I didn't know he was married until he came up to me. I had a friend who actually stabbed me in the back, literally. He was screwing around with a throwing star and launched it in my general direction, trying to scare me. It went in about an inch at the deepest spot. I was mad. Well, no word from this person on whether the friendship was over at that point, but I imagine that with the right level of wound dressing, apologies, and many rounds of beer on him, it would eventually turn into one of those stories you could both laugh about. I had a friend for 20 years. He called me at night to ask to borrow $3,600. It was for his last year of a degree, and it would get him a raise when he graduated. At the time, I was making quite a bit of money and had lots in the bank. He said he'd pay me back in a year. 3 years later, after the crash, he had still not paid me back and was constantly giving me lame excuses like he needs 3 vacations a year and I'm saving to buy a house. My situation had changed and he was still not only refusing to pay me back, but still asking for favors and loans. I finally said I was broke, to which he replied, "You're stupid. I'm never going to pay you back or help you out." I dropped him as a friend and I've had very little contact with him since. He did hire my wife at a company he manages. I guess I should have seen this coming. I'd just gotten married and had 2 kids. Another time he said, "Your kids aren't starving." He always just thought of himself, couldn't care about anybody else. I guess I thought he was funny. I listened to his stories about going out with working girls, and finally enough was enough. Last time I talked to him as a friend, he was asking me to get him some Mary J. I said it was out of my way. I was too busy. He said, "Too much to ask for, huh?" And I said, "Well, what would you do for me?" When you grow up with a guy, it just seems it's too hard to recognize that he isn't really a friend. Kept this inside for a while. Don't have any friends from high school anymore because they were all like this. I should have hung out with a better class, really. I had a friend that was desperate for a place to stay, so I let him. He ended up coming into my room in the middle of the night and aggressively making a move on me in my own bed. Threw the trust, the friendship, and my peace of mind right out the window. My best friend through high school went with me to pick out a winter coat. I'd saved all of summer so that I could get a cool one since my aunt and uncle couldn't afford much. Found one that I loved, but she talked me out of it saying it was really weird and people would make fun of me. The next day, that witch wore the jacket that I'd loved to school. My best friend of 12 years, we were living together, and I trusted him with my life. I mean, we grew up together, we even went to college together. Turns out he was doing the deed with my girlfriend of 3 years for 6 months before it dawned on me. I mean, I knew she was unhappy with the relationship. I'd confided him in those 6 months, and he'd play it dumb and try to console me. How do you do that so well to your friend? Thinking back on it, it should have been obvious to me. All the signs were there, but you just don't suspect your best friend. In the end, she stole £1,000 from me and he stole my PlayStation 2, all of my games, and moved in with her. The day I came banging on her door, she answered the door with him, with moving boxes everywhere, and he had this "screw you" stare on him, and I was just in shock. I didn't know they'd stolen from me at the time, so I just stood there in total shock, turned around and walked away. I didn't even look at her. I knew things were going south with her for a long time, but he royally effed me and I couldn't believe it. 6 months later, I got together with another girl, spent an incredible year with her, and forgot about everything that happened. Love of my life, but it went south with her too, and unfortunately she died of a seizure, and only now, 5 years since, have I gotten over it. Not so much luck with women, I guess. I imagine most stories will be similar to mine, but man, just can't believe your best bro could do that. It crippled me for the longest time. One of my best friends did the deed with my prom date my junior year, and then did the deed with my actual girlfriend prom night the next year. I should thank him. In the long run, he took 2 really loose and unfaithful bullets for me. Jerk move though, because I kind of wanted to hook up with them. when he tried to steal my toy years ago while we were still in daycare. He told his dad that the toy was his and went to leave. I chased them down before they were at their car, and his dad offered me a measly $1 for the toy, which had a value of around $30. Luckily, my mum was just coming up to the door and she straightened things out.
What's the juiciest rumor at your school that turned out to be 100% true? New kid comes to high school. He has a funny accent because his parents were missionaries traveling all over the world. He was actually kind of cool. Spoke at least 4 different languages: English, Spanish, Russian, and Mandarin. He was super polite and everyone liked him. Of course, he had haters, mainly the so-called bullies, a concept he never understood. Rumors started that he was well-versed in many forms of martial arts. He never denied or admitted to them. One of the bullies decided to find out. He was much bigger than the new kid, and new kid did everything in his power to not escalate the fight. Even took a punch from said bully. Well, guess the rumor was true. Not only did the new kid beat him up, but the bully pooped himself. Most awesome thing I ever saw in high school. Edit. Unfortunately, I was never really close to him, but I had heard from another friend of mine that he ended up moving after high school. Nobody seems to know anything else. I barely remember his first name. It was not an easy one, let alone his last name. So he will live on in memory as that one foreign kid that nobody messed with. Not only did the kid beat him up, but the bully pooped himself. Thank you. This has made it onto my list of favorite things to look at when I'm old. Resource officer was a child molester and then murdered his wife after he was fired. He fled and they still haven't found him over 10 years later. He's on Marshall's top 15 most wanted list. His name was Dan Heers and his mother thinks he's dead. The computer tech teacher got caught having sex with a student. He was put on suspension while the investigation was conducted, and he killed himself by running his car into a tree. The science teacher was a pedophile. Some kid found Viagra in his desk, and he was put in admin leave when they found a used condom in his trash after the search. Then kids came forward. Was not pretty. Science teacher at my boarding school was also a pedophile. He was caught when he was projecting his computer screen in class and child porn popped up. He was obviously fired, but his wife and adopted son stayed. I can't imagine how hard that must have been for them. I'm 90% sure my former science teacher was also a bit of a pedophile too. He would get uncomfortably close to girls and try and look down their tops. It was only after I left that school that I heard he got expelled for inappropriate behavior. Later I heard he had moved to some Asian country to teach there. Who knows what he's up to over there? 2 teachers that were married to each other were sleeping with students. The husband was the first to do it and the wife found out and slept with some of her students as revenge. Also, the resource officer was sleeping with some of the 18-year-old seniors. All got confirmed when they were fired for it. Well, the teachers got fired. The officer got moved to bicycle patrol. My school had a similar incident. Wife was fired for sleeping with a student. They got divorced and then the husband was fired a few years later for the same thing. The students were 18, so no one went to jail. Ah, yes. Find out your husband's cheating on you? Don't divorce him. Nah. Start cheating too, with people that will get you fired and possibly jailed. This one girl would make those colorful friendship bracelets made out of needlepoint floss for every guy she gave a BJ to. There were lots of bracelets. Is that so she keeps track of repeats? Rumor had it that a teacher was having sex with some of his students that wanted higher grades. No one believed it to be true because he was married and just had his 3rd baby. 100% true, and all the students were proud of it. He's still in jail 5 years later. This is one thing I've never understood about the American education system. Why do you have your teachers set your exams and give you your grades? Surely it defeats the point of having an examination in the first place and risks students/teachers blackmailing each other as seen here. An abortion using a coat hanger where a student bled to death. It happened years before I attended the school and was the basis of the ghost sightings near the bathroom. Man, this is disturbing as hell. That there's an underground bunker from the Cold War era below the school. Not only is it there, but it turns out you can access it from the PE changing room through a secret trap door. Edit, it's in Krakow, Poland because so many of you were curious. But looks like there's actually lots of schools that have one. Edit 2. Also, it is confirmed to be a bunker, but it was built before the school existed and was most likely emptied by previous owners of the building. My school had one of those as well. The hatch was hidden in the cafeteria kitchen. Its existence was confirmed when our recent American history teacher went down and took pictures for our Cold War unit. He said that most of the tunnel had been filled in with concrete, but there was still substantial walking area. My school had one of these. Though it wasn't hidden under a trap door, there was a door to it in the theater. The door led down to the pit under the stage, and the back of that led to the area that could serve as a bunker. The bunker actually led to a system of tunnels that then connected it to the middle school that was about 3/4 of a mile away. Reminds me of my high school. It used to have a coal-burning boiler, and there was a massive coal room that extended out underneath the marching band's practice fields. Some stoners I knew would sneak in there to get high, and they bumped into the art teacher in there. The art teacher had the same idea. Why is it always the art teachers? In middle school, a rumor floated around pretty much most of the school that the principal had a consistent record of sexual assault. And what do you know, he got arrested for sexual assault when I was a freshman in high school. It was all over the news and everything. The government/politics teacher at my school quietly retired because it was sort of an open secret that the girls could get a better grade in his class by wearing low-cut shirts. I don't know if he ever did anything though. A younger male teacher, upper 20s, newlywed, was having sex in his classroom during lunch with an older female teacher, married in her mid-40s. A student caught them and filmed it and pretty much blackmailed them into turning themselves in. Well, at least he was sleeping with a teacher and not a student. Well, that's a plot twist I could get behind. A student used blackmail to get the offenders to do the right thing for once. At one of the schools in my country, someone caught the principal and some other teacher having sex. They dragged him all over social media and they ended up ruining his life. The guy killed himself. We had a Spanish teacher who would keep giving random financial/business advice during classes. One day, he tabbed over to his stock trading homepage and accidentally revealed that he was a millionaire. Rumors about his past started circulating. Around graduation, some students found old newspaper articles confirming that he was a former meth dealer who had spent time in jail. Was a seriously cool guy, actually. That would be a good Breaking Bad spinoff. We had a physics teacher who was rumored to be a millionaire as well. It was said that he had a hand in the development of MRI machines in his younger years. I know he himself had stories about working in the lab of an MRI factory, so I'm pretty sure it checks out, even if he never said how much money he had. Either way, the rumors were that he had enough to retire anytime he wanted, so it was probably a lot. How the heck did a former meth dealer get teacher certification? I don't know if I buy this one. If he hadn't been caught, it would make sense, and maybe he gets a job if he has a drug possession prior, but having distribution on your record and then getting a post-prison teaching gig doesn't add up. Two sports teachers were having an affair with each other, even though one of their spouses was already a sports teacher in the same school using the same dinky office. Rumor was confirmed when the two dudes had a fist fight in the basketball court. I feel like every PE teacher I ever had was plowing another member of staff. Edit, I should mention I was homeschooled. That the school district security guard would let you get away with anything if you gave him some coke. He later got caught and fired for it. If anyone else went there, it was at Desert View High School in Tuscan. Edit, I was talking about cocaine, not the soda, for those who didn't realize that. And on a serious note, it's all about the Dr. Pepper. The wood tech teacher was married to the French teacher and they had a child. The PE teacher slept with the French teacher, and the wood tech teacher went into the PE department and threatened to beat the crap out of the PE teacher with a cricket bat. I believe this was during a normal school day, but it was before my year started there. A second PE teacher got involved and stopped it, so everyone kept their jobs. Later on, the wood tech teacher married the geography teacher and they had 2 kids, whilst a third PE teacher cheated on her husband with the second PE teacher, and every Wednesday, an hour before lunch, I would see PE teachers 2 and 3 through the window of my science classroom. They would get in a car and leave together. Sometimes I would see them come back, and sometimes I wouldn't. I jokingly pointed it out to people before anyone else caught on, and later they became a couple that was known to students. Final count, 6 teachers, 3 pregnancies, 2 affairs, and 1 angry husband with a cricket bat. Teacher from my high school. Girls were creeped out by him and constantly reported him for making them uncomfortable. He was quite obese, belly hung to his knees, so the school and other students wrongly assumed these girls were being rude. 6 years later, he's in prison after being caught with child porn on his computer, alongside upskirt photos of girls from my school. My science teacher got caught with child porn on his computer too. Genuinely though, pedophile teachers are probably more common than we think. Oh God, this is why people need to believe teenagers when they report any sort of sexual misconduct. Something similar happened at my high school in South Texas. Pretty much the same story, but the teacher was an older man. I never had him, but some friends of mine always said he made them feel uncomfortable. Was outed as a pedophile a few years later after finding child porn on his personal computer. That there was a girl in the boys' bathroom giving BJs for $10. There really was, and she got expelled. $10? That's way too cheap considering the risk. Girl in my class did this only for free. Came back to class after lunch bragging about how there was a literal line of guys and she'd blown 12. A girl blew the whole basketball team after a game. Don't know the exact details, I just know the girl left and 3 kids got expelled. I'm not naming the high school for privacy reasons. The reason they got expelled was because it was a Catholic school and they did it in the locker room. My 6th grade math teacher was super creepy. He would assign seats randomly, but always place the girls in the front of the classroom. Did the whole lingering stare thing and was always trying to get people to hang out with him during lunch. I never did, but he was married and has a baby, so no one really suspected anything of him other than being creepy. Fast forward about 7 years, the teacher ended up being a sex offender. He had an ongoing relationship with a girl that began when she was 13. Based on what I could see from the various news articles, she was either in my year or the year before me. The police came to arrest him in the middle of his class, cuffed him in front of his students, and then had to walk him throughout campus in cuffs to get to their car. I don't feel bad for him at all, but I can't imagine how his wife and son must feel. The same exact thing happened at my school, except he was an art teacher. What is wrong with the world? Probably not the juiciest thing, but the one I remember because of how I found out. A few of our high school library walls were weird, sort of a lowercase b shape. So there was this empty space behind the bookshelves up against the walls. Tunnels, basically. Word was students were messing around in there. I worked in the library, had to move the shelves, clean the tunnels, found used condoms. It was an all-boys school at the time, if that matters. Mind, the condoms weren't the worst thing really. The leftover food debris in there was worse. Stuff like chicken bones. Edit. A couple years later, I was talking with an ex-schoolmate. Another guy from our graduating class comes in. I hate that guy, my friend says. He's gay. Dude, you're gay. There's gay, and then there's so gay other gay people think you're too gay. Turns out that gent had been one of the entrepreneurial fellows selling services for a few dollars ago. I wasn't shocked since I already had some idea, but I was surprised that the going rate had been so cheap. You know you've hit rock bottom when you'll give a blowy for a piece of fried chicken. Either that or that's some awfully good chicken. There was a rumor that our female English teacher was sleeping with the starting QB and that her youngest child was not her husband's but the QB's. She was caught sleeping with a different one of her students years later, and it is now known that she has slept with a number of former students, including the QB. Now people really think her youngest kid isn't her husband's. When I was in middle school, the big joke rumor was that 2 teachers were banging. Years later, everyone finds out that not only were they having an affair outside of their respective marriages, but that the male teacher was cheating on both women with a man. The female teacher moved away and ended her own life. The entire situation was unbelievably messy. I'm always amazed at people who have the energy and time to cheat. Like, how did he stay organized enough to fit in a wife, a mistress, and a gay lover while working full-time? It just sounds exhausting. The physics teacher was sexting and sleeping with one of his students. Not sure if she was 18 or not at the time. Although, honestly, no one was surprised. He was a little too friendly toward the girls and changed his pants in the back of the classroom once. He ended up leaving for personal reasons over Thanksgiving break, but of course it got out. Sadly, his wife was in her 3rd trimester, which probably didn't make it any easier for her to find out her husband was sleeping with a high school student. I feel as if a disproportionate number of the sex-offending teacher stories involve a pregnant wife or just born child. That within the first 2 weeks of school starting and everyone meeting each other, one of the girls had a threesome with 2 guys who didn't really get along. So she convinced them to make love, not war. We had a study hall teacher who was a huge hard ass with a handlebar mustache who was retired Navy. Turned out he was a hardcore gay/BDSM porn star in the early 2000s. He got fired even though it was long before his time teaching. I ended up writing a letter to the administration, county, and their attorneys, but he stayed fired. I guess it would be hard to command respect from students when Googling his porn name immediately brought up a pic of his balls bound in leather. Our math teacher in high school had a student teacher she was helping train to take over for her when she went on maternity leave. The student teacher was maybe 20 or 21 and a fairly attractive young woman, so naturally all the guys in the class had a crush on her. One guy in particular was a super senior, around 18 to 19. He flirted with her non-stop and she would act super embarrassed and blush and in a non-committal way tell him to knock it off. I'm sure you see where this is going. Well, towards the end of the semester, he bragged about going out on a date with her and how they went to the movies, then he went back to her place and they had sex. We all thought he was full of it. But the rumor got around the school, and of course the teachers and faculty found out. Then one day, she's just gone, and we had substitute teachers for the rest of the semester. We all knew what happened. Looking back, it's kind of a shame that she probably wrecked her future teaching career because of him. Yeah, teachers shouldn't start that young with people they were allowed to bang a few weeks ago. A girl got caught giving her boyfriend a blowjob in one of the stairwells of my school. The government teacher, one of the most ultra-religious and pure-hearted individuals on earth, was the one who caught them. Ended up in a science class with the girl. She did not care at all that she got caught and took her legend status like a champ. Still makes me laugh over a decade later. Similar thing happened at my school, but the guy got put on the sex offenders list even though they were both 14 and the girl initiated it. She wasn't punished. Georgia schools suck. There was this couple I knew in high school who did stuff like this. Our school was small and we just had tables, mesh tables, important, out on a black top that served as an all-purpose courtyard and lunch area. Since the girl wore skirts, he would often finger her under the table during lunch. Teacher walked by and somehow didn't notice. She even blew him a few times in full view of everyone, thinking she was being slick. Also, there was this time I had to deliver something to the chem room and this girl, different girl, was giving a hand job to 2 guys at once during class. Their seat was in the back, but in line of sight of the teacher's desk. Don't know how they never got caught. Very attractive, married with kids PE teacher was screwing very attractive, married with kid English teacher. We all thought they were just very flirty people, but nope, full-on affair going on. I call bull. I've never seen a remotely attractive PE teacher. The music teacher in my high school was rumored to have been fired for sending explicit photos to a female student. There had been subs taking his place for nearly a month. The principal said he was too ill to come into work, and eventually another rumor that he had cancer started spreading around. He had been bald longer than anyone could remember. If you asked any of the school's staff what was going on, they would just say, "He's just sick right now, we don't know when he'll be returning." One day in my physics class, everyone in the class pestered the teacher for the whole period until he finally gave in. Some people were still trying to argue the cancer story. One student asked the physics teacher, "Did he send nudes to that girl?" And he finally said, "The thing that you think happened, it happened." The student said, "So he did?" And the teacher simply nodded his head yes. A month or so later, the music teacher showed up in school. Everyone was running up to him in the hallway asking what happened. He dodged every question, and the last thing I heard him say was, "I'm just here to get some things." He didn't teach his class that day, and I never saw him again. What's one rule that your school/workplace has implemented that absolutely backfired? My high school banned girls from wearing any shirt that exposed their bra straps, because seeing a bra strap would give high school boys evil thoughts. Most of the girls in the school responded by wearing the same shirts they'd always worn, without bras. As a teenage boy, it was a happy couple of weeks. The school tried to then mandate that all female students wear bras, until a male teacher asked a 15-year-old if she was wearing appropriate undergarments or not. She called him a pervert. Her parents, who thought the whole dress code thing was as stupid as most of the students, threatened a sexual assault harassment against the school. Everybody in charge panicked, and it all went back to the way it was before they tried to change anything. Would give high school boys evil thoughts? I wish school administrators would give up this stupid reasoning already. They can easily just cite professionalism as their reason to force kids to dress a certain standard and not be in the wrong. Like if boys want to walk around with their pants sagging and their underwear hanging out, tell them to fix their clothing because they look like slobs. No good reason to treat the girls any differently. During our general meeting last week, the owner of the company went on a bit of a rant about negative reviews of management on a popular jobs website with a green logo. He demanded that we stop posting negative reviews immediately and shamed anyone in the room who had done so. As you can guess, people doubled down and posted their grievances on the same day as the meeting. The green logo company doesn't take too kindly to that sort of behavior. Seriously, they will terminate service if management is caught doing that. Report it. At my old company, different coworkers eventually fessed up to which reviews were theirs. Almost all the negative reviews were true, and the company now hardly exists anymore. Go figure. Because of rumors of a drug problem in the school, the administration decided to drug test students. The media jumped all over that, violation of our civil rights or something. The initial statement was that anyone who failed the test would be kicked out of school. After the 40th or so kid failed, they changed the policy to mandatory meetings with the counselor. After the 100th kid failed, they hired another counselor. Our school just brought in drug-sniffing dogs that would randomly come into classroom. The thing was, the sheriff's department would always be parked in front of the school before the first bell with clearly marked canine cars. So anybody who had drugs would see the cars and just skip school that day. Absences increased massively. If you signed up for any extracurricular activity, including sports, clubs, band, etc., you were also signing yourself up for the possibility to be randomly tested. I got tested once, and it was right after I got foot surgery. So of course I tested positive for painkillers. The school nurse even had them locked up in her office if I needed them. The school admins threw a huge deal about it to my mom, and needless to say, she was not very impressed. My old boss tried implementing an incentive scheme for the underperformers, while anyone who consistently did well received nothing. 3 of us quit within a month. I worked somewhere that had an incentive program for top-earning departments. They announced in advance that they were discontinuing it. Everyone, while not thrilled, was okay with it because it was only a small sect of employees who were eligible, and they kind of knew it was bull because no one else in the organization was eligible. Come to the month it was supposed to go away, they accidentally issued every employee another bonus. They weren't giant bonuses, 300 to 500. They immediately announced they were going to pull them back over the course of the next 3 paychecks, taking 30, 30, and 40% of the bonuses back each check. Our entire department quit, just walked. What's funny is that in a similar result to your situation, the departments across the company who were underperforming, they didn't get the bonus, so none of them quit. They lost their best performers over what equated to about a $2,000 per location bonus. My high school did something like this. They hand out these tickets to teachers to give to students to incentivize them to behave better. Well, most teachers gave them out to students who normally behave badly if they were having an uncharacteristically good day. Meanwhile, students who always behaved well got nothing. It didn't really backfire for them because the well-behaved students didn't care enough to rock the boat. I did get a couple because I had one teacher who would wait until the end of the year and give them out to the students with the best grade in his class. Trouble was, by then the candy bars were gone and there weren't t-shirts left in my size. All that was left was office supplies, Mardi Gras beads, and t-shirts either too large or too small. We used to be allowed to stream music and such on our computers. Spotify was an approved program and would come installed on your computer. Someone complained about productivity despite us always doing our work, and so they banned streaming of any kind on our computers. But now everyone just listens on their phone, so you walk around the office and nearly everyone has their phone out now, so it looks even worse when sponsors come into the office. Yo, Pandora, Spotify, and YouTube are easily my best work friends. Banging out emails all day without listening to music would be borderline unbearable. Strange that they'd make a stink about Spotify causing productivity, but I have seen some offices ban music streaming because their office internet bandwidth slows to a crawl when everyone is running Spotify on their computers. Work instituted a point system for being late or calling off sick. Accrue too many points and you get written up, fired if it continues. They doled out the same number of points whether someone was a minute late or called off altogether. And if an absence lasted up to 5 days, it was still only 1 absence. So anyone who overslept or encountered heavy traffic and was running late would just stay home for the rest of the week. After several months, they decided that being late was only worth half a point. I used to manage a casino that had the exact same type of thing. The way it was abused is if someone was running late, they would call to say they were en route, and could you please not give them a demerit? If you refused and said that they would get one, they'd just say, okay, I'm canceling my shift then. Same demerit, so why not take a Friday night off? Upper management never figured out how the system was stupid and refused to remove it, so we just stopped handing them out. Side note, it is better to reward good behavior with incentives rather than punishments for bad. 1 month, no late, no cancel, free meal. 2 months, half a day off with pay. Compare this to lost time for lates and no-shows, and so on. I worked at a place with that system. I missed 14 days total in increments of 3, but only got docked 3 points. In my defense, it turned out I was allergic to the product we made there, a type of plastic, the one they used to make chairs. And that's why I ended up missing work so much. That's the one workplace I wish I could have made work out because I adored the job, my coworkers, and my boss, but the job itself didn't like me. Back when I worked at Disneyland, they had a system like this, and I believe most, if not all, departments followed it. If you called in sick, you received 3 points. You could call in sick for up to 4 consecutive shifts on the same 3 points. On the 5th shift, you were put out on a leave of absence and required a note to return. If you were late, you received 1.5 points. Depending on your status or seniority, you were written up based on the number of points you accrued in a selected amount of time. For example, 9 points in 3 months, 12 points in 6 months, 24 points in a year, etc. The points would fall off 1 year from the date you initially received them. Here's the kicker. They also have a call-in option called dependent. A dependent call was 0 points for up to 3 consecutive shifts. When that was first instituted, it was meant for people who have dependents that they need to care for at home. namely children or elderly parents. At the time, you had to qualify for it by having these dependents listed on your tax forms with HR. If you didn't, you got 3 points. Later, Disneyland was forced to open the option to all cast members, but revised the policy to limit all dependent calls to single shifts, no more consecutive shifts, and cap them at 4 a year. They were use them or lose them, and they'd reset on January 1st. Furthermore, the CM would have to say who they were caring for, kid or mom. Do you know how often people called in dependent on January 1st? Most of the time when they left their voicemail, we could still hear the party going on in the background. It wasn't unusual to have massive staffing issues on January 1st because people who were not scheduled to work didn't want to come in because they had already received the day off, or wouldn't answer the phone, and these kids were calling in to care for their grandmothers. Seriously, I don't know if Disneyland still uses that point system, but in theory, you could miss about 25% of the year if you watched your points carefully, balanced your sick and dependent calls, and were never late when you did show up. In our office, we were not allowed to have more than 14 consecutive days off. So one guy booked a cruise for a month, booked off 14 days, then 1 day back, then another 14 days off. He called in sick his 1 day back. Here in the US, some people don't even get 14 days off a year. If I remember statistics correctly, the average was 13 days per year. Edit, after a quick search, public sector is 20 to 22, private is 13 to 15. Edit 2, I'm just posting averages. The range is from the fact that it comes from multiple Google results. Many people in the US are replying that they have a lot more or less. Keep in mind that this is averages for all jobs in the US. We weren't allowed to be friends with kids in grades above us, but we could be friends with kids in grades below us. That rule didn't last long. I feel like a lot of these could have been avoided by stopping to think for a few seconds. This is something you reread and then reread again in disbelief. I'm not even sure that counts as a backfire. That's just a facepalm. At an industrial site I used to work for, they introduced an absolutely no overtime policy. The people that most commonly worked overtime were the maintenance guys. They had to cut out their preventative maintenance in order to make their hours while being available for all shifts. It took 3 months of daily breakdowns before they decided to try something else. Honestly, having 3 shifts worth of maintenance guys doing things round the clock would be far better than my last job. I was part of the maintenance group for an aging 50-year-old power plant, and the management upstairs decided that only operators worked in shifts. Maintenance had to make do with only 8 to 5. Overtime for the workers barely existed, and since I was a frontline supervisor, I wasn't being paid anything at all to oversee them when things went into overtime, because I was reclassified as salaried while still being dinged for being late or taking leave, due to them giving us issues for the number of leaves compared to the rest of our country and our industry. The place I worked at did something similar. We worked a 40-hour work week, 5 days at 8 hours each. Here in Australia, after 38 hours you get paid overtime, so each week we got an option, either 2 hours overtime pay each week, or we could take off 2 hours early one day. Usually Friday it was often half and half with who did what, so there would still be a few mechanics to do any work. Management made a change where there was no overtime to be taken at all unless we got written approval by the GM. So we all started taking off at 1:30 on Friday, leaving the workshop deserted. So they started making us do a 7-hour and 36-minute workday 5 days a week. As a screw you, we would just not finish up and sign off any of the equipment after 1:30 on Friday. It was still going that way when I left. The mess that place turned into is why I never finished my apprenticeship. My old workplace did something similar. We used company trucks, so they instructed us to start cleaning up at the job site early so we could get back before the 8-hour mark. The problem was that it usually took a lot longer to finish a job that way because of all the wasted time driving, setting up, breaking down, and driving back. A job that could have been done in 1 day with 2 hours overtime now took 2 days to complete. But hey, at least they weren't paying overtime. Boss insists that lunchtime is from 12 to 12:30, no exceptions. Lunch is not paid time. The second day, he comes in hot to trot with something for me to do between 12 and 12:30 and needs it done right away. I look over at my clock, which says 12:09 or whatever, and say, "You said yesterday that lunch is from 12 to 12:30, no exceptions," and went back to my sandwich. If I don't get paid from 12 to 12:30, there's no way I'm working for free. We have the same thing with smoking breaks. I don't smoke, but I see my colleagues doing this. There's a fixed schedule which group can go to the smoking area at which times. Result? Smokers declining or leaving meetings or tasks mid-work to go for a smoke at the right time. So much trouble, but yet the management did not change anything. I had the exact same conversation with our boss. He insists lunchtime is unpaid, no exceptions. So we insist we don't work at lunchtime, no exceptions. He still doesn't get it. College removed chairs in the cafeteria so people wouldn't hang around. Now people just don't eat at the cafeteria. It's a ghost hall and most of the food is thrown away daily. Really sad. They did this at my school and a whole bunch of people just sat on the floor. Frankly, the floor was pretty disgusting, but it got them to put the tables and chairs back pretty quick. You'd think for the exorbitant college prices, you'd be allowed to hang out anywhere you want. Any support call lasting longer than 25 minutes must be reported to higher-ups for review, i.e. if you have too many, no matter if it's your fault or not, you get a disciplinary review. I implemented the rule of politely hanging up on a customer as close to 25 minutes as I can and call them right back. I'm sorry, I'm experiencing a small issue with my phone. Is it okay if I call you right back? Gotcha. Outgoing calls are not reported or recorded. It's amazing. Bosses are idiots sometimes. Man, ever since we instituted that rule about not having calls go over 25 minutes, our employees have gotten really good at keeping their calls to exactly 24 minutes. It's amazing. Any software related to the job, whether written inside or outside company time, belongs to the company, me. So if I write and release malware at home, it's the company's problem? The clause was immediately removed. That's hilarious. The company I work for now is the same provision, with the exception you can get written approval from the admin for that piece of software to be your own. All printers were defaulted to print two-sided, and you were unable to disable that feature. The thought process being that this would 1. Reduce paper waste by literally cutting consumption in half, and 2. Prevent people from printing out personal crap on work printers. This was decided by a committee of people, primarily from HR, who were tasked by the CEO to find ways to reduce costs and improve our corporate culture. To improve our work culture, we basically decided that we'd be annoying about work printers, and then we'd all sing together and have a Coke. What ended up happening instead was that corporate finance had a fit because you can't or shouldn't print financials double-sided, and the IRS doesn't take too kindly to getting filings delivered to them in that fashion. Reverse the policy? Nope. Just force areas to add blank pages into documents so that we trick the printers. HR then implemented their new Justapost system where you were rewarded for turning in anyone who was doing personal business on work computers or on work printers. The problem was that a stunning amount of personal business was actually stuff like employee benefit stuff, filing insurance forms, submitting flex pay receipts, scanning your transcripts for our tuition assistance program, etc. While the VP of HR decided to go full-on antagonist and say that employee benefit stuff wasn't work-related and needed to be done at home on your personal PC, our chief legal officer came down as our voice of moral reasoning to say that that was bull, and only then did some of the stupidity unfold. The printer thing was done officially once the CAO and CFO started getting double-sided financials. When they complained, their underlings gave them time studies to show the financial cost of having highly paid CPAs do crap like insert blank pages to trick printers instead of, doing accounting and stuff. Wow, how messed up do your decisions have to be that legal is the voice of reason on behalf of the employees? At that point, the only thing you should take away from this is that HR is about to cause lawsuits for the company, the literal inverse of what the department is supposed to be doing. My friend worked as a technician at a place that did installation for telecom, sound, cable, pretty much anything tech related really. The techs were paid by work order completion. Each job had a value that got paid out when you finished the work order. The experienced techs could finish more jobs in a day and made some seriously good money. They were motivated to work faster to get more jobs done, but also to do it correctly, because having to go back within a certain time window and fix a problem didn't pay out, so it lost money. Well, some new management came in and decided to change everyone to hourly wages. Their idea to make techs focus on getting the job done right and not rushing it. All the really good techs saw a massive pay cut from it and immediately quit. The rest of the techs suddenly had no reason to finish jobs quickly since you got paid the same whether you did 2 installs or 10 installs in one day. So everyone just started slacking off. Within a few weeks, the orders were backed up so bad install dates were pushed out for a month or more. And when people finally did get their stuff installed, it took all day instead of a couple of hours. That one change completely screwed over the company. Nothing like greedy management to completely mess up a good thing. There's some video on YouTube from a guy who does car work on this. He reenacts per hour and is sitting there slowly removing paint off a quarter panel with the tiniest tool he has, asking if it's 5 o'clock over and over. Then he switches to the per job version, grabs this huge air-powered sander and buzzes it all off, spray paints it in the new color, then peels out of his garage. No cell phones in high school. Security collected them when you walked in, put them in Ziploc bags, and locked them up. They lost like 5 people's phones. If I was the parent, I'd file a police report for a stolen phone and a small claim suit for the value of the phone. I'd be petty. This one is too easy to work around. Unless you have to totally empty your pockets for security and walk through a metal detector, just hand them a dummy phone. No one expects a kid to have more than one phone. Doctors of Reddit, what's the biggest case of faking it you've ever seen? Taking trauma call during surgery residency, I had a prisoner come in after a fight and claimed he couldn't move or feel his legs. All the CT scans and MRIs were normal, but we would shield his legs so he couldn't see them and poke them with needles and other sharp objects with enough force to cause pain. He never flinched or moved his legs at all. He was diagnosed with SIWORA, which stands for spinal cord injury without radiographic abnormality. He stayed in the hospital for a week. No improvement. Always had one guard with him. One night, they were down in the lobby watching some television, but the guard needed to use the restroom. The patient said, "Where could I possibly go? I'm paralyzed." The guard left him alone for 2 minutes. The patient was last seen sprinting down the road, naked butt cheeks flapping in the breeze. Made it to a city 4 hours away by car before he was caught again. I've never seen anyone fake it so well. Truly playing the long con. Yeah, this guy had a plan and he was seeing it through to the end. Dermatologist here. Patient was convinced she had a melanoma and needed a biopsy and would need to be on workers' comp. I told her it looked like ink from a marker. She demanded a biopsy. I wiped the area off with an alcohol swab and showed her the ink and that there was no spot on her skin anymore. She stormed out, threatening to sue. I'm just glad I cured her melanoma. You truly are a miracle worker, doc. Had a patient come in for a fall who now couldn't move their legs at all. Did a bunch of tests and didn't find anything. The patient was not at all fazed by suddenly being paralyzed, which was the first red flag. Didn't really believe anything was wrong, but the patient was still not moving their legs. My options are to admit for a huge workup or get them to walk. So I update them saying everything is fine, tests are negative, you can go home. Patient gets up, gets dressed, and walks out without a word. So we're not even going to acknowledge the fact that you just completely lied? Not a doctor, but I worked in healthcare for nearly 20 years. While taking a break from the ICU due to it being emotionally draining, I worked in home health for a bit. I had a patient who clearly had Munchausen syndrome. On a daily basis, she would call her insurance to see what things would be covered if she was diagnosed with this or that. She called her doctor's office an average of 5 times during my shift with her. She would report all kinds of non-real symptoms. She pestered the doctors into doing an exploitive laparoscopic surgery. Of course, nothing was found. One day, I walked in and she was rubbing her incisions with rotten cabbage, trying to get it infected. She wasn't seeking pain meds, except to sell. Really, she was just as happy with antibiotics or stool softeners. Anything. As long as they wrote her a prescription and she got to go to the pharmacy where she did a whole song and dance for them too, claiming allergies and reactions. She always increased the exaggeration of her story too. One time, she fluttered her eyes after making sure I was looking and said she lost consciousness in that half a second. She called the doctor and claimed she lost consciousness for 5 minutes. She called the insurance and claimed it was 10 minutes. She called the pharmacy and claimed it was 30 minutes. Then she called 911 and told them she woke up on the floor after losing consciousness for 4 hours. The worst thing about her was she was a mom. Her son was 28 at the time, and by all the stories of his childhood illnesses and her saying how he's severely disabled, I knew she basically screwed up his childhood with Munchausen by proxy. She portrayed him as being severely disabled, and that's why he would never find a wife. I met him. He was healthy and of average intelligence. He wasn't looking for a wife. He was gay, but she refused to accept that. Working with her was so miserable that I took a couple years off from any and all healthcare after that. No, I don't blame you. It sounds like you paid your dues with this woman for a while. We had a patient faking a seizure, so my supervisor told one of us to get the brain needle. The patient made a miraculous and swift recovery without intervention. A young woman, maybe around 18 to 20 years old, went running into a small rural hospital ER pretending to have abdominal pain. Police officer had tagged her going 40+ kilometers over the speed limit, which was stunt driving as per the new law in Ontario. Impound and license suspension automatic. Cop followed her into the ER and apparently said he'd be waiting for her when she left. Locum staff such as myself were housed at a small B&B about 15 minutes away, and the ER had pre-printed orders set to be done before we arrived. When I arrived, she flat out admitted that she just came in because she freaked out and didn't stop. I told her we'd give her 45 minutes to call her parents or family before I booted her. Except BHCG came back positive, and subsequent ultrasounds came back showing extremely early ectopic. The officer figures out something's up when he hears an air ambulance call come in over the radio. She was completely asymptomatic and just worked out that she dodged both charges and a life-threatening issue by accident. It was definitely a WTF moment. She's incredibly lucky she ran away from the police. You don't get to say that often. Pediatric neuropsychologist here. Got a referral for more or less consolidation care. Patient was 13, wheelchair bound, required therapeutic oxygen, seizures, arthritis, musculoskeletal problems, suspected autism, completely nonverbal, severe behavior challenges, the list goes on. He was being followed by at least 8 different specialities. Clearly, none of whom were communicating with each other, and the med list was around 18 prescriptions long, including some incredibly heavy-duty stuff. Opioids, antipsychotics, antiepileptics, that sort of stuff. Got kicked to me after his upteenth ER trip because the ER doctor felt something was off, and he needed someone to look at the whole picture. Factitious disorder by caregiver or Munchausen by proxy. All of the original symptoms were parent-reported, going back to about a year old. It possibly started with a fever-induced seizure in infancy, but this was never witnessed by anyone but mom. She's been telling docs different things. She was convinced her son had all these disorders, told him he was gonna die any day. He got a Make-A-Wish trip, donations, all kinds of things. He was removed from her custody and taken off most of his meds. Within a few weeks, he was out of the wheelchair playing basketball, no oxygen, super talkative and friendly, and no behavior problems. He did have a pretty significant intellectual disability, but there's no way to say if that was organic or the result of the prescription cocktail he had been fed all his life. Hopefully, with some good therapy and a stable home, he can continue to make progress. Some parents just really know how to mess up their kids. Physical therapist here. Working mom comes into the clinic with her infant in a stroller. She's limping like she's got a nail in her foot, wincing in pain and tears in her eyes. She's crying during her visit with the PT. None of us think she's faking it. She limped out of the clinic. I glanced out of the window and saw this woman bounding down the sidewalk, hips swaying, full stride, going places. We were all fools. I guess she was just there for painkillers or something? Whenever we had kids, usually teenagers, playing up their symptoms to extend their hospital stay, we would order them into a healthy lifestyle. Lights out at 9, no screen time for 2 hours before bed, healthy diet chock full of fruits and vegetables, screen time limits, minimum number of laps around the unit per day to get in their exercise. They got better so much faster with our healthy lifestyle tips. My brother was an EMT for 2 years, and he told me this. People will try to use the ambulance as a means for transportation from Fulton to Oswego because the hospital's in Oswego by faking seizures. Sometimes when the head EMT guy was feeling fun and knew the person was faking, he'd say something like, "Man, it's weird that he's having seizures but not peeing himself." Apparently, the person would kind of snap out of it for a second, weigh up the repercussions, then either pee themselves or stop faking. I thought that was hilarious. Sorta along the same idea. Working at a pharmacy, we saw a guy come in to try and get a refill on some pain meds that had no refill. After pleading that his ear really hurt, we told him again we couldn't refill it. One of the other employees saw him step into a side hallway, take a pencil, and jam it forcefully into his ear repeatedly, drawing blood. He calmly left and went to the ER. He came back a few hours later with a prescription for pain meds. Oh, this one really bothers me. This isn't faking. This dude has an addiction and apparently will do whatever it takes to get his pain meds. This patient comes in for back pain with weakness of the legs. Gets a full workup with MRI, standard blood work, and then some immunological things to look for stuff like myasthenia gravis. No neurological or immunological explanation for the weakness. Patient is seen by physical therapy and they're of the opinion that the patient is holding back intentionally. Go to see the patient at the end of the day and prep them for discharge. Patient is infuriated that they're being discharged, yelling and screaming about how they aren't better, how they're disappointed in the institution, and blah blah blah. They said one particular thing that still clearly stands out 3 to 4 years later.
I can't believe you're sending me home already. I haven't even told my family I'm here, and now you're gonna send me home before they even have the chance to see me?
My attending and I leave the room to arrange things with the nurses. We go back in and the patient is out of bed and standing up in the middle of the room. Miraculously, the patient is able to walk with zero assistance, when they had so much difficulty walking with assistance over the past 2 days. At that point, they were enraged we went in the room without knocking. They were discharged home after having a conversation regarding abuse of medical services. Had a patient when I was an intern feigning blindness. She would constantly be playing on her smartphone, only furiously trying to hide it when someone from the care team came into her room. The best was when my attending one day strolled past her room and threw his hand up in a highly exaggerated hello wave. She started to throw her arm up too, but caught herself halfway through, then threw her hand back in her lap and pretended to be staring off into nothing. Nurse for an ophthalmologist here. Had a 21-year-old new patient claiming to be completely blind from a sudden and severe glaucoma diagnosis from a previous unknown doctor. Would feel around while walking, tried to keep his eyes rolled back into his head, the whole 9 yards. He said he's a famous YouTube rapper that's now unable to make videos or earn a living. I exclaimed to have heard him before, and very excitedly asked him to search and show me his YouTube channel on my phone so that I could subscribe. He took my phone out of my hand and effortlessly found the YouTube app and typed away in the search bar. Oh, and of course his eyes were back to normal and focused. Come on, man, you're gonna fall for that? One time my roommate, who's an ICU nurse, came to see one of my indoor soccer games. During the game, a player on the other team went down hurt and started screaming in pain and swearing and rolling around while holding his ankle, before he eventually was helped off the field. He then limped over to where the fans sat and watched the rest of the game brooding in silence before he left early. After the game, my roommate told me he was going to go over and see if there was anything he could do to help, until he saw that the guy was limping on the wrong leg. How did no one else notice this? Only the nurse caught on to the fact that the guy's limping on the foot that he hurt? Was told this one by a fellow nurse I used to work with when we had a psych floor. It's not unusual for psych patients to stash things in various orifices. This one woman was convinced she was impregnated by a ghost-like figure, but no one would believe her. So one day, she started complaining of massive pelvic and uterine pain. She called them contractions. So the doctor goes to do an exam. The doctor feels something larger in there, so they prep a table to get the object out, which was quite large. So the wonderful third year helping with the procedure starts hearing this woman complain of contractions and yelling things like, "Should I push? I'm gonna start pushing!" The doctor is trying to work forceps around this woman's parts as to not hurt her. Finally goes, "Got," and as he starts saying it, pulls out a baby doll, head only. The poor med student did the wobble, went all flush and had problems keeping balance and about took a dive. I was told he didn't live that down the whole rotation. I mean, I don't blame the poor kid. In his mind, he just saw a baby's head get ripped off. I once saw a patient who had been faking paralysis of the legs for years, used a wheelchair, and never walked. Old records showed extensive imaging, neurology consults, and other tests that proved the patient had full function of all his extremities. Family and friends were just going along with it, not sure if it was really conversion disorder or if the patient had some secondary gain issue. Not a doctor, but am a UK-based midwife. Had a patient who had been in and out of hospital throughout her pregnancy with episodes of heavy bleeding. This was her 6th baby, so she was a fairly well-known patient in our unit. The issue was no one had ever seen her actively bleeding. She'd call saying that she had bled down the toilet but flushed it. All the examinations we did came back completely normal with mostly no evidence of any bleeding whatsoever. On occasion, during spectrum examinations, we'd see the smallest smallest amount of blood. I was caring for her during a shift where she yet again called to say she was bleeding. I walked into her room and found her jabbing her private area with a sharp object to make herself bleed. She'd been doing it the entire pregnancy. The reason she gave? Because she had 5 noisy children at home, she needed some rest, and knew we wouldn't admit her to the hospital if it wasn't for a good reason. She would do it any time her being discharged home was mentioned. We ended up having to complete a prenatal mental health referral and consult with the safeguarding midwives, as she was putting herself and the baby at risk of serious harm. I understand needing to get away from the kids for a little bit, but this is an extreme. Ophthalmology technician. People pretend to be blind all the time. I go to check their eye pressure with the Tono pen, a device you poke them directly in the eye with, and they go, "What the heck is that thing?" I'm a nurse. We had a guy who had to come in every 3 months to get a medical certificate to say he couldn't work at his retail job due to severe disabling back pain. He was receiving large amounts of insurance money for this condition. After the doctor had done his usual examinations and questions and signed it off, the guy asks the doctor to check his shoulder, which doc does and asks how he injured it. The guy says playing rugby for a competitive team. "Really?" says the doc. "How long have you been playing for them?" Guy's been playing and training the whole time. Doc puts this info on the insurance form. The doc lost it in the staff room laughing. Next week, the patient loses his mind in reception because his insurance has been cancelled. You kinda brought this one on yourself, my friend. Back when I was a nurse, a guy came into the ER for a stomachache. When asking him about history, he randomly mentions a fight with his girlfriend where she left in a tizzy and he fell asleep on the couch. 20 minutes later, when we see the CT, he has a satellite cable remote wrapped in a condom lodged in his rectum. I'm guessing he was intending to frame her. I didn't get to hear the conversation he had with the doctor. I was curious how he was going to explain why she was nice enough to wrap it in the condom. This has gotta be one of the stupidest plans I've ever heard. I'm a nurse, not a doctor. I had a patient who worked in a hospital as a janitor, so he knew enough to fake a bit. He was seeking pain meds, complaining of chest pain and wanting morphine. He was worked up for everything cardiac and was fine. Then he tried to claim GI discomfort when he was being discharged. Cleared again for everything. So he faked chest pain again. Cleared again. Now he's my patient. I'm a new face. He tells me he's having abdominal pain. I call the doctor, knowing this guy's history. He says he'll be up to see him soon. This patient wants a ginger ale, some stomachache. I decided to go to lunch. My coworker comes into the lunchroom disgusted. This guy had taken a dump in a basin and then dumped the ginger ale over it and tried to tell her he had fecal vomiting. He obviously needed meds right now for the pain. I walk into his room and sure enough, a pile of poop in a puddle of ginger ale. I told him I'd have to take away his food and drinks and we'd have to put an NG down. Suddenly, he changed his tune. He admitted to faking it. Why do these people do what they do? ER nurse here. I was bringing a patient back to a room who said he had kidney stones. I had him stop at the bathroom and get a urine sample. Dude comes out with the specimen cup that literally has a piece of concrete in it. Looked him in the eye expecting some sort of joke. He was serious. I threw it away and walked this foolish man back to the waiting room to contemplate his stupidity. When I was a medical student, I worked in the pediatric side of the emergency room, and we would give popsicles to all the kids. One afternoon, an 8-year-old came in with his father, and I asked what was wrong. The kid couldn't remember what he had complained about to his dad, and the dad couldn't remember why he brought his kid in. The kid's mom was a nurse, and she worked at another hospital at the time, but she was the one that would keep track of all these things. Anyway, after a few minutes trying to figure out what was going on, the kid asked, "So can I have my popsicle now?" The kid was 100% healthy. Unfortunately, we reinforced bad behavior and both the kid and the dad subsequently left with popsicles. Years ago, I had a patient who had been rear-ended in an auto accident a few weeks before I saw her. She had a history of lupus. She was decked out in the usual I'm crippled paraphernalia. Crutches, neck brace, elbow braces, wrist braces, knee braces, all of it. And she could barely walk. I saw her a couple of times and she showed no improvement. One Saturday I was on call but had to take a backstreets route to the hospital because of an event taking place on the main thoroughfare. I apparently drove around her neighborhood because, wonders behold, she was wearing old lady spandex power walking down the sidewalk, holding weights in both hands. I didn't call her out. Next week, she was back at the clinic with her "I'm crippled" get up on again. A few weeks later, I got a subpoena for the deposition, and it all became clear. I'm a surgery resident. When I was on my trauma rotation, we had a patient come in after MVC with question that maybe the patient had seized and that had caused the accident. So he's in the trauma bay and starts shaking. The trauma nurse goes, "Oh, this isn't a real seizure." And the patient stops shaking, sits up, turns to the nurse and yells, "You don't know a thing about me." Prisoner came in with signs and symptoms of a big stroke. At that time, the protocol was to get a non-contrast head CT to rule out a bleed, and then give TPA, a powerful clot-busting drug that's only worth the risk if the benefit is to mitigate a major stroke. So that's what happened. Later in the course, he got a little carried away and started embellishing his story with symptoms that didn't make sense with his stroke diagnosis. And that's how we figured out he was faking it just to get some time away from jail. Can't say I blame him. At least he wasn't trying to escape. He just wanted to get out for a day, it sounds like. Massage therapists of Reddit, what are some of your most awkward or disgusting experiences with clients? Tell me all the weird crap you've dealt with. Then tell me if it's worth it making this career choice. My mother's been a massage therapist for over 20 years. She's in her 50s and she loves it. She massages a lot of elderly people and doesn't mind. She massages a few obese people and doesn't mind. To her, people are people, and she's not easily disgusted. But when people proposition her for sex, she minds. One particularly troubling encounter was when she was massaging a friend's husband, and he thought it would be appropriate to ask for sexual favors. I hope she went and told her friend about that afterwards, cause I'm sure she'd want to know. I had a very eccentric client, which is a nice way of saying creepy. They came into our clinic one day wanting a tui na massage. It's a type of Chinese massage. We usually leave the room to let the client strip down into their underwear before we commence. But with this guy, I had no chance to get away. Before I had time to give him a towel, he dropped his pants to reveal a sparkling blue G-string that barely kept everything in place. The guy was about 58, huge beer gut, gray hair, gold earring, and hairy like Robin Williams. As I started the massage, the guy started to tell me that he worked as an erotic masseuse specializing in body slide massage. This is where the masseuse gets oiled up and rubs his body and genitals all over before screwing the client at the end. The whole time I was massaging him, he kept telling me that I was really good with my hands. He also repeatedly told me how he was good at his job and plugging his business with a hinting tone. It was a very awkward session. Yeah, not the kind of job offer you want while working. I was getting a massage last week, and in the little room next to mine, there was a talkative older gentleman. He was chatting away to his massage therapist. Then it went quiet. After a little while, I heard him whisper, Do you do this for everyone? A large female client wanted focus on her glutes. Needless to say, I was farted on while she was asleep. Her own fart woke her up, and then she accused me of farting because there were trace amounts of fart still in the air. I'm sure it wasn't pleasant at the time, but now you have a funny story to tell. I've had clients ask if they could massage me, specifically my butt, while I was working on them. One woman tried to put her face in my crotch and told me she would love to lick me. For the record, I was wearing yoga pants as I'm also a yoga instructor. Many people are surprised at how strong I am and comment on it and how small my hands are. That's not odd. What was odd was the guy who followed that observation with telling me that I also had moved like a Wolverine. Not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Former massage therapist here. I used to work in the YMCA in my hometown. There was a group of 4 older ladies around their early 50s that all played tennis together, and afterwards took turns getting massaged. At first, it was great. They were mostly doctors' wives, fairly easygoing and generous tippers to boot. But then things took a strange turn. One woman offered me a diamond tennis bracelet if I agreed to switch the order they were massaged in and did her first. I declined the gift but promised to use a rotating schedule in the future. She was fine at first, but slowly became more aggressive. She would beg and bribe me to extend her half hour for 10 or 15 minutes, in spite of her friends waiting. She constantly offered me expensive presents, shopping, home-cooked meals, all kinds of things I was uncomfortable accepting. The more I declined her offers, the weirder and edgier she seemed to get around me. Finally, I guess she got tired of beating around the bush and made an outright advance by grabbing my hand and forcing it onto her breast. I told her I was very flattered, but I wasn't interested in other women this way. She screamed, perfectly in range of all her friends and my coworkers to hear, about how I'd been leading her on for months and how I didn't deserve any of her time and money. She berated my appearance and education before storming out the door naked and furious. I quit that day, started waiting tables, and never quite worked up the nerve to go back. Sounds like this woman was a little more invested in your relationship than you were. My mom is a massage therapist. She used to work out of our house. She had a studio downstairs where she would have people over for massages. One day, a woman who came over was probably in her late 60s. Oldish, slightly overweight woman. Now, my mom, as is standard procedure, asks this woman to disrobe and get under the covers while my mom waited outside. When she came back in after a few minutes after asking if the woman was done, the woman was standing in the middle of the room completely naked. The woman said, "Honey, I'm sure you've seen more than this in your day." She had not. That's not right. You're intentionally putting your masseuse in an uncomfortable situation. I'm sure they don't want to see any of their clients naked. I do it and I love it. I'm a guy, and I have to say there are some creepy phone calls, but that's about as bad as it gets. One guy asked exactly what kind of massage I did, which is a common precursor to "do you do extras?" And I clearly told him about Swedish massage. He said, "That's something my partner and I would be interested in," and asked, "And for the ladies, do you do sensual massage?" I find this euphemism so frustrating. It literally doesn't imply what they want to imply, but it's become recognized as a word for sexy time. I said no. He then said, "Could you?" I said no. Then follows a common awkward situation where we try and both pretend that he hasn't just asked me for some kind of sexual service in return for money, and finish the conversation as you might otherwise. This conversation and the time a rather lonely elderly gay man told me how much he appreciated having a pretty man take care of him were about the weirdest moments. Admittedly, when Mr. Lonely Gay Guy said that to me, I felt a bit gross, but also internally giggled, blushed, and said, "Aw, he thinks I'm pretty." For a fleeting moment, I considered a life as a wealthy boy toy of an aging thespian. My ticket into the high society of homosexual retirees. Feeling slightly jaded and ashamed of my life built on lies and sexual quid pro quo, but driven by the idea of inheriting his immaculate house and fortune. Then I remembered I was a bit far down the road of life for that change of tact, having married a woman, and I decided I would diminish and remain Galadriel in the West. But the weirdness is worth it. Swedish massage is a very fascinating practice based on Western medical understanding of human physiology. You'll learn words like desquamation and lymphatic. There are perks, like ladies paying you to touch their body. There is admittedly a slightly pervy pleasure when you're massaging someone really attractive, but it's seldom and balanced by your professionalism and the amount of slightly tubby men one deals with. And as a guy, I have a disproportionately high level of men, because women therapists won't see guys. It is great though, because men have more muscle, and that's the fun part for me. Getting deep into a thigh or shoulder and working the bits loose. It's truly the best job ever, though I often come home smelling like people. The absolute worst was a guy started touching himself while I was working on him. I have had one other guy proposition me, and one lady that was such a jerk that I ended the session because of what a jerk she was. I've been a therapist 5 years, and these are the only really awful things that have happened. Daily I help people. Daily I make people feel better. I'm sure that's the majority of the job. Of course, there's going to be a couple of weird stories, given the field, but I'd like to think for the most part, they get to do their job the way they want to do it. I'm just going to say prolapsed uterus and they could have warned me, and leave it right there for you to imagine the gaps. I had to suffer this image being put into my head, so now you guys do too. I just graduated in April and I've seen some things. There was a guy that would come to the campus clinic to get a massage from the students. Well, one day his cyst popped. Warm pus flew 3 feet and hit the curtain. Smelled like death. Oh, and then there was the job interview where it was made clear that their distinguished clients would pay for a little extra. How about a big bowl of nope? I'm a massage therapist, doing medical type work. My clients are all super nice, so not many awkward experiences, but I'll share 2. The first one, I came back to change the sheets after one client had gotten dressed and left, and found that she'd had some diarrhea on my table. Luckily, our laundry service treats all of our linens as biohazards anyway, but yuck. And second, I came into the room after washing my hands and letting my client get undressed, and she realized she hadn't been specific enough about how she'd injured her back. So she got up, stark naked, and proceeded to demonstrate the motion she'd been doing when she hurt herself. I wasn't disgusted, bodies don't scare me, but I definitely felt awkward. That's about it. I love my job. I definitely suggest going into massage therapy if you're compassionate and can handle a good amount of physically demanding work. If you're worried about sexual come-ons, stick to medical settings. If you're worried about bodily fluids and/or smells, go the spa route. My brother is a massage therapist for a side income and has tons of horror stories. One of the strangest ones is a man came into their studio, he shared one with others, and specifically asks for a man. Well, he's left in the room with the typical instructions, undress and get under the sheet. And when my brother comes in, the guy is sitting on a couch, cross-legged, naked as the day he was born. Anyway, weirds out my brother, who apologizes and asks him again to get under the sheet and leaves for about 5 minutes. He comes back and begins the massage. Apparently, this guy had a huge penis tattooed on his back and kept hinting for more. The guy even started slightly pulling the sheet off his butt with his hands, and saying things like, "It's just the 2 of us in here. What happens here stays here. I wouldn't say anything." Basically, all of this unnerved my brother a good bit, who was all too happy when the guy's time was up. But, like a champ, he continued to do massages, although they did add that guy to their watch list. I can only imagine all the stories behind the people on that watch list. I worked as a receptionist for a massage service facility. Every masseuse was licensed and the business was legit, but I guess having an all-Asian staff gave creepers the idea that we provide extra services. One day, a rather large white man requested one of our longest massages, 2-hour Swedish massage. I instructed him to disrobe and lie beneath the bedsheets while his massage therapist prepared for the massage. Hand wrist stretching, hydrating, that kind of thing. Typical procedure. He seemed like a decent guy, so I wasn't expecting any trouble until the masseuse that had just entered the service room stumbled out backwards shouting profanities and slamming the door. Apparently, he was sitting stark naked at the edge of the bed with his wang out, upright, and at full attention. To make it worse, according to the masseuse, when she walked in and gave him a startled look, he gave her the creepiest smile and jumped off the bed as if to approach her. We threatened to call the police and he left, though he had already paid for his service, so too bad for him. I've been doing massage for 10 years, have worked on several military bases, Sedona and Laughlin. You see some strange tattoos, some really interesting scars, some insane back hair, and smell some pretty nasty feet. If you like helping people and aren't into it for the money, especially in this economy, then it's definitely worth it. That's probably your general experience as a massage therapist. Not a whole lot of creepy stuff necessarily, just some kinda gross stuff. I'm a beauty therapist and do massage too. I once had a girl roughly the same age as me in her 20s come in for a body massage as a present from her boyfriend. Whilst doing the massage, I could see the oil looked weird, like a streaky brownish color, and it smelt weird. Well, the client smelt weird. After the massage, we chatted for a bit and she mentioned she'd spent the morning fake tanning herself. I looked at my hands and they looked like I'd just dipped them in chocolate. So brown. I then had to explain to her that it wasn't the best idea to do that as she'd now be one streaky mess. Tan fail. I know some girls have had creepy guys in for massages in the past, but luckily I haven't. Nothing exciting to tell, I'm afraid. Although, one girl had a guy in for a massage, and when she told him the massage was over, he offered her a 21st special extras. She ran off crying. I was still in school and I was giving this guy a massage. Towards the end, he started shifting around a little and acting a bit awkward. I didn't think much of it and just went about finishing up. He'd said it was his first massage. As he exited the room, he got all shifty-eyed and awkward and seemed a little embarrassed. He didn't want to talk to me. He just paid as quickly as he could and got out of there. I went back to change the sheets and there was a nice little present sitting under the top sheet. A shining little glob. I didn't know what it was, though I had an idea, so I leaned in to sniff it just to be sure. Yep, it's what I thought it was. The worst part? He didn't even tip. He just left something from his tip. That jerk. Why on earth would you smell it? I had a woman that had explosive diarrhea during the treatment. I didn't know what to do, so I just ran out of the room. That's probably the best thing you could have done. Female therapist here, and surprisingly, nothing too creepy or weird so far. I had this one client while still in school who really wanted extra focus work on his toes of all things. After spending my time on his toes, he wanted glute work. He pulled his tight shorty shorts down and bared his hairy bum. Not exactly what I was expecting, being so innocent and new to the field. Needless to say, I pulled his britches right back up. Since then, I've had a few clients make sexual references or try to give me hugs afterwards. No blatant, "Here's my penis, you know what to do with it." There have been a lot of boners though. Every day, all day. All I see is a clock and boners. Alas, I do love my job. It's easy, but hard work at the same time. Very rewarding. I think it depends on where you work, what area of town, and who you're employed by. But I personally love what I do. Yeah, at the end of the day, if this is the field you're looking to get into, just be careful where you work and who you work with more than anything else. Assuming you're trying to avoid these situations. A client came in unable to fully stand upright due to low back pain. I told her that I would likely need to work in the hip area, so she should probably remove her underwear. She then said, "Oh, well, I had an accident earlier today and I threw away my panties so I would be more comfortable leaving my pants on." I did the massage anyway, although my coworkers were telling me to refuse to do it. But I felt like if you've already pooped your pants that day, you'd probably feel even worse if someone refused to touch you because of it. However, at the time, I was assuming that she'd actually cleaned herself post-liquid poop. I massaged her back and did compressions on her glutes and hamstrings with her pants on, all while the smell of excrement wafted in my face. Then I noticed at the end of the massage that she had brown stains along the cuff of her pants. She gave me a nice tip, but I had to thoroughly bleach the entire room and sanitize everything after she left. But nothing can sanitize my brain. Physical therapist here, but we do massages a lot. Here's a few quick ones. A girl on her period without a tampon or pad who stunk like heck from body odor messed up the towel we put out for the patients. Next, a woman in her late 40s. I sent her into the room and said that I would follow after taking a short break to get something to drink. Upon entering the room, I found her completely naked doing the sexy look. I turned around and left. In a clinic for chronic pain therapy, a woman accused me of sexual abuse because I didn't want to give her a happy ending. Luckily, she confessed to the psychologist that she made it up. A patient with a polytrauma and a fixature extern fled naked out of the 3rd floor. We didn't know how to manage this, or even why he was running. And many more stories I just can't remember right now or would take too long to explain. But even those bad stories can't take down the positive effects of the job. Grateful people everywhere. My sister is a massage therapist, and one day while working at a very nice upscale spa, she noticed that the guy she was working on would not stay still. He kept wriggling around on the table and she kept having to ask him if he was okay and comfortable. He said he was fine and she would continue, only to have it go on. Finally, the massage is over and she leaves the room to let him get dressed. She waits a few minutes, then knocks on the door to see if he wants water or if he's ready to go pay. He tells her he's done and to come on in, and she walks into him touching himself on her massage table. Apparently, he'd been grinding on the table / trying to get some friction / touch himself, or who knows, while she was working on him. She had taken a break from massage for a while, but she's now back working at the same place, and she's already had people ask her for a happy ending. Needless to say, she's not really crazy about the profession anymore. That's just it. I hate to say it, but at the end of the day, this kind of thing is gonna happen because there are creeps. If it's not something you can handle, then I don't blame you. Massage therapist here. There are some pretty unfortunate clients. Ones that smell, ones that are really fat, ones that are really skinny. Massaging bone is harder than massaging fat. Awkward ones, really hairy ones, horny ones who leave stains on the sheets. But my most off-putting types of clients are the ones, usually older, with lots of dead skin, that once you start to massage them and do the motions with your hands, their skin, combined with the oil or cream, makes for a disgusting mixture that sticks to your hands and onto their skin. And you're just smearing it everywhere, and trying to fling it aside so you can get through the rest of the hour. That's the worst for me. This wasn't even something I had considered until this point, but ugh. Male massage therapist here. Back when I was in school, I was doing a clinic at the school. It was a pretty chill scene. A lot of us developed regulars and got into a routine. My nights were Tuesday nights, and one day I came in and noticed I had a whole list of my regulars in, including this older man that had been coming to the school for years and getting massages. Every week since starting, he would request me. Now, the school says they can't always get you the massage therapist you want, but they'll try. Every week, like clockwork, he would be my last client. At first, he was nice and social. Then, over the weeks, his questions got extremely personal, and despite my trying to avoid personal questions, he would keep asking. As well, over time, every time I would get him to turn over, he would be packing a major rager. This was usually the point where questions got more personal. One night, I finally had enough, as he began asking if I would ever give a special ending for a large tip. I calmly declined and approached one of my instructors the next day. She just nodded her head and offered to change my night I worked. Kinda feel like it needs to be a little more addressed than that, but hey, at least she got you out of there. Redditors who work in the ER, what's the scariest, dumbest, or weirdest thing someone has come in for? Had a lady come in for shortness of breath, began to place an oxygen mask on her, and she yells, "I'm allergic to oxygen!" and pulls the mask off. I heard the doctor laugh behind the curtain. Maybe that's why she had shortness of breath? Morbidly obese guy came in for lower right quadrant pain. I lifted up his gut and found his lost wallet. Solved 2 problems at once. 20-year-old male came in for stomach pains. Said he was hungry and hadn't eaten in 2 days. Maybe you should try a sandwich. I have a male cousin who landed himself in the ER because he thought that instead of a condom, he could put something tightly around his male appendage and it would force everything to stay inside. Unfortunately, getting it off posed a problem and he ultimately wound up in the ER with a zip tie around his male appendage. His nickname has been Zippy for 5 years now. So, did it work? My friend worked in ER. She had an obese man come in complaining of a rash under his gut. Upon close examination, they found several splinters. When asked, the man casually replied, "Oh, that must have been from the love board." So the crew had to ask for details. Apparently, the couple had to use a board to pry the man's gut up to get to his business for lovemaking activities. Well, there's an image in my mind I'll never lose. A girl came in saying she was miscarrying, claimed 27 pregnancies and 0 live births, says that in the last 2 years since she went on birth control to help regulate her periods, she's had a miscarriage every month. We had to explain to her that she was experiencing regular periods. You know, this is why you need to pay attention in health class. My aunt is a nurse and this is her story. 2 extremely drunk men come in. One of them fell down the stairs and somehow got glass in his eye. They had pulled out the glass and sealed the gash in his eye with super glue. They had to soak the eye in acetone to get it open. That's terrifying. I'm an x-ray tech and the hospital I used to work at had a lot of homeless people come in. This one man came in and there was an order to x-ray both his feet. As soon as I got to the hallway with his room, there was a nasty smell. I got to his room, opened the door, and almost puked. He was soaking his feet in water and it was the worst thing I have ever smelled in my life. His skin was peeling off and getting stuck to the x-ray board. I had to stop a couple times, but I kept my poker face. One case that really freaked me out was a guy that came in that was around my age, mid-20s. He was having severe pain in his shoulder, but claimed he didn't injure it. He gets taken back and gets x-rays done and finds out his body is absolutely riddled with cancer. He was given 1 year to live. The family's reaction to the news was so heartbreaking to witness and something I'll never forget. A number of things come to mind, but top 3 without thinking. 1. Man with a 10-inch cucumber in his rectum. Didn't mention said cucumber until the MD noticed a bump on his stomach. Still didn't say anything until we got a CT result. Number 2. Older man came in with a vibrator in his rectum. Wife couldn't get it out and refused to come with him. Number 3. Younger male came in with priapism. Urologist was called in to drain it. One of the most bloody, horrifying things I've ever seen. I saw him again 3 days later for the same thing. I honestly don't know what a priapism is, and I'm not Googling it. My mom used to work in an ER. When patients came in, she was the one who took their insurance, asked about their symptoms, took their vitals, and things like that. One day, she's entering paperwork for a woman whom I think came in for injuries to her hands, but I don't quite remember. Mom's taking her information, and one of the questions is the patient's occupation. The woman says, "Oh, I'm a stripper. I work for Dinty Moore." Mom responds that she had no idea Dinty Moore hired strippers. The woman says, "No, I'm a stripper," and gestures emphatically in the air with her bleeding hands. Turns out she strips the meat off of cowtails. That's apparently what the meat is in Dinty Moore beef stew, cowtail. I was shadowing in the ER once and this big white lady came in with this massive bruise around her lower stomach area. The doc asked what happened and she responded, "My horse kicked me in my pooter." And I just bit my lip and turned around to force myself to not immediately bust out laughing. Had a car crash through our ambulance bay, action movie style. The entire car was well within the building when it finally stopped. It was a 16-year-old kid carrying his 14-year-old brother who had been shot in the abdomen over some gang stuff. Many people had just vacated that area seconds earlier because there was a CPR that came in, and they were all in the trauma room working on that. If they hadn't been, then there would have been a lot of injuries. I used to work in the accident and emergency department in our city hospital. Without a doubt, the worst thing I ever dealt with was the police and social services bringing in a 2-year-old who had been immediately removed from his home after a child protection visit. The parents had stubbed out lit cigarettes on the child's eyes, on his actual eyeballs. He had the most horrific injuries, both old and new. I'll never forget prepping the child for surgery to have his eyes removed. The fact that any human could do this to another, especially a child and their own flesh and blood, is the scariest thing ever for me. Those people should be buried under the prison. Honestly, that's just awful. So we're going to take a hard 180 here and go back to something funny. Guy came in with a salt shaker lodged in his butt, said he was changing a light bulb, then somehow fell onto it. How do they always fall onto it? My sister had a patient who was interested in having her clitoris pierced but was afraid of the pain. Curious, she affixed a super strong magnet on top of and below the clitoris but couldn't remove them. By the time she got to the hospital, her tissue was essentially dead. The doctor had to scrape the magnets off as there was no other way to remove them. I'm a man and was born with all requisite parts, so you know just how serious this is when I say that story made my clitoris hurt. One time the news was playing on the TVs in the waiting rooms. The anchor mentioned a man shot in a gang-related fight who later died from his injuries. Suddenly, my parents hear screaming and crying in the other room. It was the family of the guy who got shot. They had not been informed yet. Oh, that's terrible. How is the news finding out before the parents who are in the waiting room? Come on, guys. I had a guy who put a flare gun between his legs, I guess pretending it was his thing, and fired it. 3rd-degree burns to the groin are not fun. Probably the dumbest one I've had was a husband and wife who rode in an ambulance together, both clearly drug-seeking. For whatever reason, they were placed in rooms across the hall from each other and kept yelling back and forth about what drugs they were getting. The ambulance was initially called for the wife who had fallen downstairs. No injuries visible or on x-rays. The husband rode in with them and checked in, claiming the wife had fallen into him and taken them both to the ground. The husband's only injury was where he said his feet had tangled in the steps. There was no bruising, swelling, abrasions, nothing. But he had clearly just manually pulled out 5 of his toenails. They were not contiguous toes and it involved both feet, just the nails. Emergency medicine is the daily interface in the process of natural selection. So it takes something truly stupid or crazy to shock me these days. Here's a couple highlights from me. Had a guy come in with a plastic hanger, the hook part, stuck in his cornhole. As it went in, it snapped and broke away from the body of the hanger. Next, the 50-year-old dude who came in with generalized abdominal pain said he had no idea what was going on. Super nice guy, talkative, very friendly. We do an abdomen acute x-ray and all you see is a massive set of batteries floating in his colon. Yep, giant dildo lodged way too far in. Off to the OR he went. Lastly, the nice couple who came in after a vigorous boning session because she broke his thing. One interventional radiology study later, where they inject dye into his urethra to test for patency, and the dye wouldn't advance, showing a stricture in the urethra. Off to the OR he went. One of the stranger complaints I've heard as a resident. I had a 19-year-old guy come into the emergency department on the night shift on 4/20 this year. His complaint was that he got high and he decided he should touch himself and his urethra felt harder than normal. Not his thing, his urethra. I got to the room to assess him and he was in the bathroom peeing. His poor girlfriend was sitting in the corner with her head in her hands out of embarrassment. He got back from the bathroom, stood in the doorway and said, "You know, I feel better now. I think I'm just gonna go home." And then he turned around and walked out. So wait, he just had to pee? I used to be an EMT, and one time we got called to a house in the middle of the night for a patient with belly pain. We get to his house and he's bent over a chair in extreme pain. We get him in the ambulance and start taking him to the ER. The whole drive he's letting out tiny farts that are deadly, also yelling that he just needs to fart. Can't we give him something to make him fart? The ER doc asks us if there's a possibility of a foreign body issue and I say that I didn't check. The The doctor sends him to the CT scanner where he lets rip a fart that echoed. He felt better and left the ER. They had to close the scanner to air it out. You know what? I appreciate that. I wouldn't want to be the next patient walking into that place. I have two friends that are nurses in ER. Friend A said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle stuck in his butt. Friend B said that there was a guy who went in because he had a pickle jar up his butt. Will everyone stop putting things up their butt? I had a guy walk in completely impaled with a 4x4 wood post. He was drinking and working on his roof when he fell off. His buddy got a chainsaw, cut the bottom off the post, and somehow the impaled guy stood in the back of the pickup truck for the ride to the ER. He walked in the reception area and said, "Hey everybody, I hope you don't mind if I cut in line a bit. This seems quite serious," and promptly passed out. He survived. I worked in an ER for a little over 2 years and as an EMT running 911 calls for another 2. I have plenty of stories, but this one's pretty good. So these two 20-ish-year-old girls come in and they're lovers. Apparently they had been fooling around and one girl stuck a bottle of hand sanitizer in the other's butt. The bottle was about the same size as a shampoo bottle. Well, it got stuck, so they came in to have it removed. The doctor was able to pry it out of her butt and he threw the bottle in the trash. The girls were discharged and the girl's nurse, who we'll call Steven, and myself walk in to clean the room for the next patient. Steven says to me, "Hey, check this," reaches into the trash and pulls out the offending bottle of hand sanitizer with his bare hands. He squeezes a huge dollop of the gel in his palms and rubs his hands together, laughing hysterically. That was one of the weirdest. Also, once in medical school, I was doing a clinical at a very small 3-bedroom ER in a very rural town, and this giant fat lady accidentally burned her left breast off trying to pour a giant pot of boiling pine sol on the floor. First, the whole hand sanitizer thing, I get that you're cleaning it with the hand sanitizer after, but it's just gross. Second, burnt off? A colleague told me this one. Man came in with a major rager that wouldn't go away. Claims he hadn't taken any drugs, but I have no idea if that's true or not. Turns out he woke up with it, then went to work for a full day before coming to emergency to get checked out. I honestly don't know what happened after that. I don't work in ER, but in a hospital. Back in West Virginia, girls used to come in frequently for just a pregnancy test. Not like they sell them in the dollar store or anything. My absolute favorite was a 23-year-old who came in at like 3 a.m. because their sunburn was itchy. There was also a guy who had a baseball-sized festering stinky sore on the top of his head. He had had it for over a year and was just wearing a baseball cap and ignoring it. You could smell him from the hallway. A dude shot some kind of injectable Mexican Viagra into his thing so he could have some fun with his girlfriend. Turns out he basically totaled his junk. Urology told us that it was never gonna work again. Best part was, he had a wife who he had to explain this to. Finding out that some old dude with a part of his intestine hanging out of his abdomen that drips out poop all the time, and who's unable to get a hard-on without shoving a needle into his business, is somehow married and has a girlfriend while I'm still single as hell, was quite a realization. Well, if it makes you feel any better, he's probably not going to have either for long. So my brother works in the ER. A guy came in the middle of the night with a carrot stuck in his butt. He said he was walking in his garden and fell. Another was a couple who came separately to the ER at night. The girl had a heavily bruised head or something like that, and the guy had a crooked thing. Apparently, while the girl was giving the guy a little bit of fun, she had a seizure, her jaw clenched, and the guy panicked and hit her with something. The situation with the couple sounds awful in so many ways. My brother had two varsity football players, rivals from rich AAAs no less, come in with fractured arms, shoulders, and concussions. They actually had to choose between getting them out of their pads and physically restraining them when their screaming alerted one another that they were both in the same ER. Both of them had functioning legs and both were in cleats. There were stitches for staff afterwards. Don't you guys have other stuff to worry about in this moment besides your school rivalry? Come on. My aunt said it was incredibly common for people to come in complaining about terrible stomach pains only to be told that they had a, well, buttload of poop that they just needed to get out. I worked in ER billing, not the ER, but this story actually makes me incredibly angry. I had a less than 10-year-old kid's chart with codes for nausea, vomiting, and a broken rib. So I, being Snoopy and having time to waste, opened up the nurse's notes instead of just entering the info. Turns out the kid swallowed his toothpaste after brushing instead of spitting it out. Mom of the Year freaked out and gave the kid the Heimlich, to the point of breaking her own son's rib. An honorable mention goes to the lady who came in with her workers' comp insurance info ready to go for a laceration, which is pretty common. But in the section for laceration repair, the nurse had angrily scribbled through dermabond and sutures and whatnot to handwrite tiny band-aid in the box. Yeah, this lady went to the ER and wasted a whole bunch of people's time for a paper cut. My godmother was a surgical tech, and the best weird stories all involve things stuck up people's butts. Bottles of Windex, shaving cream cans, tubes for gerbils. Did you know putting live gerbils in your butt was a thing? I didn't know that. The worst part was half of the patients she saw for the "I shouldn't have put that in my butt" were repeat offenders. Then there was the older patient who called her in because he couldn't find his appendage. Turns out he had a ton of foreskin and couldn't pee. Mom had to glove up and use a tongue depressor to uncover the head of his business so he could pee. The ER is full of crazy stuff like this. While I was sitting in a waiting room, a man comes in, maybe 50 to 60 years old, goes up to the counter and tells the lady, "Yeah, I don't know if this is cause for concern or not, but I went to bed on Tuesday night and woke up today." It was Saturday morning, 3 days later. He was told to have a seat and I was out of there soon after, but I've always wondered what the story was behind that one. My curiosity's been piqued here too. Yeah, I'd be going to the hospital too. Please give me an answer to what just happened. A guy came to the ER with an arrow through his head. We thought he was wearing one of those Halloween props, but no, it was real. Watching the neurosurgeons trying to maintain composure when examining the patient was priceless. He went straight to surgery and, from what I understand, did very well. Yeah, I'm sure the surgeons don't have to deal with something quite like this very often. At the time, I was working as a transporter in the radiology department. We shuttle patients in the building to and from tests. I get a page to pick up a patient from our green zone in the ER, non-emergent. I walk into the nursing unit and start looking for the nurse. They see me and get that weird smile on their face. The type of smile in healthcare that makes you worry about what type of patient you're going to be picking up. I walk into the patient's room, introduce myself, and then explain we're off to X-ray. The patient is a very unassuming 20-something-year-old male, non-belligerent, and answers my identification questions very calmly. If anything, he just looks slightly red-faced. I ask him if he's able to walk, and he explains that he's having stomach issues and really would prefer not to. No big deal. I have him get his legs on the stretcher they use as beds in the room and wheel him on over to X-ray. Get him in the room, close the door, and go to fetch the techs to take the images. Now, our X-ray staff is full of seasoned techs with 10+ years of experience on average each. The tech looks at the order and tells me to wait around since it won't be long. Alright, no problem. The tech comes back from the exam room, super quiet about 6 minutes later with a slight smirk. She waves the other techs over to a computer in the back room, away from the patient, chuckles, and pulls the images she just took to be fixed up. Two of the younger female techs bolt away from the computer, hands to mouth, and slam the door. One of the techs whistles, and the older female techs, almost in unison, go, "Well, that could cause an abdomen complaint. Very visible in the rectal cavity was a large toy." Long story short, the patient told the tech that he had a new girlfriend and she wanted to try something new. Little do most people realize that it gets to be like a vacuum to get things out of there, and up it went. 5 hours later, he was released after it was removed, the old-fashioned way. Ladies and gentlemen, this entire video has been a PSA, don't stick stuff up your butt. Doctors of Reddit, what's your most surprising, "I can't believe I'm having this conversation with an adult" story? Paramedic here. Was driving with my partner and patient was in the back. Patient was fine. Patient's skeezy boyfriend was riding in the front with me and apparently saw a golden opportunity to ask a question that had obviously been on his mind for some time.
So, when cats and dogs eat grass, that means they have cancer, right?
No. No, it does not. Made for an awkwardly silent ride the rest of the way. Where did this guy hear that? I've never heard that before. Well, it looks like she's about 30 days pregnant. Congrats! How can she be pregnant? She's only around her brother. Well, they actually don't follow the same moral code as you or I. I'm a veterinarian, by the way. Thank you for the clarification there. Not a doctor yet, but I'm an ER tech. For about 2 years now. Mom comes in with her baby plus 2 more older kids. Complains that the baby hasn't pooped in a while and won't stop crying. As I'm settling them in with one of the nurses, the baby is bawling. Like opera singer lungs bawling. Suddenly, Mom whips out a white plastic shopping bag and sticks an end in the kid's mouth and says, "This is the only way she stops crying." Nurse and I share a look and immediately order an emergency x-ray on the kid's stomach. Turns out she had ingested a good amount of these bags and it was blocking up in her stomach. Big deal. Potentially life-threatening. When we confront the mom about her baby feeding habits, her only words of defense are, "Well, I checked all over the bag and I couldn't find anything on it that said non-edible." This woman's a potential danger to her kids. She has 2 older kids, meaning she was probably doing this with them too before. I told a patient that the 30 plus cups of coffee he was drinking every day could possibly be the reason of his chief complaints of anxiety and insomnia. He said he wasn't willing to give this up or try decaf. That's an insane amount of caffeine intake. Like, that's not healthy for multiple reasons. When I was an internal medicine resident, I came across a very nice 50-year-old Dominican lady. She was well-mannered, but one could tell she wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed. As I was prepping her chart for our first visit, I noticed that she'd been seen by every single digestive disease MD in our hospital system. Not only that, she'd had every single procedure in the book, ranging from endoscopies up both holes and culminating in an exploratory laparotomy. You're opened up to basically look inside you when we have no clue what's going on. All of this because for years she'd had one single complaint. She reported severe gnawing pain in her stomach. At this point I should mention that she was Spanish speaking only. Not only that, she had a very heavy Dominican accent, and I was the first Hispanic doctor to ever see her. My first language is Spanish, and even I had difficulty understanding her. So she comes in and after exchanging some first-time pleasantries, I politely ask her how she's doing. Sure enough, although she was smiling and said she felt well, she pointed at her belly and said it was biting again and asked for the cream to kill it. At this point, I got intrigued. Her medication list only mentioned a cream used for herpes breakouts. The previous fellow only mentioned in his notes that in every single visit she only asked for the cream and nothing else. When I asked what she meant by the biting and what she intended to do with the cream, she very calmly tells me she intends to stick the cream up her butt in order to kill the bird living inside her. After delving more deeply into her story, it turns out she didn't have a medical condition. Ever since she was a little girl, she believed that after eating a whole quail egg, the bird had spawned inside her and gnawed away at her insides whenever she was hungry. After a short visit to psych, she was diagnosed with a somatic type delusional disorder. No amount of medication or psychotherapy will cure her, but she was still a fully functional mother of 2 who paid her taxes and had 2 part-time jobs. I reached out to every digestive disease doctor in our hospital system once more to make sure she never receives an inappropriate invasive intervention. I've been following her for 3 years now, and she's as happy as one can be, considering she has a bird living inside her. Why wasn't a translator brought in long before? Why did it take her going through every single doctor and a range of surgeries to finally find someone who spoke Spanish? While in dental school, my friend pulled out several bombed out teeth on an adult male. After the procedure was finished and post-op instructions were given, the man asked, "So when should I expect my new teeth to grow in?" He was serious. My significant other is a med student. He helped to diagnose a 40-year-old woman who finally sought out a doctor after having open, festering wounds on her entire torso for over a year. The open wounds only appeared after more than a year of painful, visible lumps on her breasts. She had never sought treatment prior to this. My significant other had to inform her that her entire body was riddled with cancer, that there was no treatment to help her, and that she would be dead very soon. Her sister, who was there the entire time, began loudly proclaiming what a shame it was that nothing could ever have been done, and that hopefully someday we would be able to detect cancer sooner. My significant other watched the doctor explain that pretty much any other woman in the country would have gotten effective treatment at the first sign of the lumps. This was during Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Guys, if something's wrong, just get checked. Don't put it off for a year. You never know what you're dealing with. Better safe than sorry. As a veterinarian, I had a 10-minute conversation with an owner explaining which side was the dog's left side. It's the left side. The left. I saw a patient who was concerned that she was still lactating, despite the fact that she had stopped breastfeeding her twins 2 years ago. She said, "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and find my husband sucking on them. He says he's trying to drain the milk for me." I had to explain to her that breastfeeding her husband will lead to continued lactation. Okay, this one's just creepy. Medical assistant to a cataract surgeon here. If you sleep with your contact lenses in long enough, they will fuse to your eyes and you'll need to go to surgery to have them removed. Yes, you can go blind from this. For the love of God, don't sleep with your contact lenses in. Thank you for the PSA and horrifying imagery. Got placed during a rotation in the orthopedic floor of a big hospital in a rural area in Southern California. I was doing my rounds and saw a patient out of bed and walking around the floor following a knee replacement. She had a cane in her hand that she was carrying as a soldier would a rifle. I asked what she was doing and what she thought the cane was for. She replied she thought the cane was for pushing people out of her way since she's now handicapped. I mean, I guess that's one way to use it. I'm a pharmacist, but the comment still relates. Had a lady call in complaining that her husband's Viagra wasn't working. I then went on to explain to the patient's wife that in order for the medication to work, the patient needed some sort of stimulation. The lady just screamed aloud, "Me?" and then hung up the phone. Still my favorite Viagra story. The fact that you have multiple Viagra stories to choose from makes me want to sit down and have a conversation. My friend is a student doctor and is on placement at a small town's doctor office. She had a 70-ish-year-old woman come in with complaints of a small but painless growth that was visible at the back of her throat. Turns out, it took her 70 years to notice her uvula. Yeah, that's been there the whole time. Client brings in her dog for a tick she tried to burn off. Looking, I see it's a nipple and tell her this. She says, "But he's a boy, how can he have nipples?" I say, "Ma'am, your husband has nipples." Blank stare, then light bulb moment for her. Not a doctor, but I regularly have people come in for eye examinations because when I take my glasses off, things are blurry. Often, these aren't passing comments during the exam, but the main reason for their visit to the clinic. Patient comes into ER, 19-year-old male. I'm getting his history. "Why are you here today?" "Every morning I wake up and my stomach hurts." "How long has it been hurting?" "All my life." "Well, what's different today that made you come here?" "My girlfriend doesn't think it's normal." More questions. Exam by ER physician, followed by lab tests. The abdominal pain always goes away after he eats. Always. He wakes up hungry. He thinks it's pain. I don't know what to say to this one. Just eat food? During residency in an urban northeastern USA city, I was in a clinic. A very pleasant 50-something lady came in for a physical. Everything was going fine when she casually asks if there's any new vaccines out. She was up to date with everything, so I asked if she had any specific concerns. She was casually asking to see if she could vaccinate her gay adult son against homosexuality. Very nice, always had a smile on her face, even when I broke the news to her. My mom was the head nurse at a clinic here in Houston in the 80s. She worked for an old World War II doctor that had gone into private practice as an old school general practitioner when he returned back to the States. Well, one afternoon she told me that they had a patient come in that was running a high fever and was complaining of pain in her pelvic area. My mom also tells me that there was a stench coming from the woman's lap that could only be described as enough to gag a maggot off a meat wagon. She begins to interview the patient, who told her that her and her boyfriend had been sexually active and that she has been in pain since. She thought that the woman may have contracted an STD and asked her to undress and wait for the doctor to examine her. The doctor arrives and closes the door, only to reopen it a few seconds later, mentioning about the need for fresh air. The doctor noticed that there was a discharge and began to question the patient about her sex life. Was it protected, not protected, things like that. According to my mom, the patient told her, "No doc, we always use a rubber." The doctor looked down, then noticed there was a small rubber band extending from the woman's private area. The doctor reached in with his gloved hand and pulled it out. What came next can only be described as a magician pulling the cloth out of someone's mouth. One rubber band after another came out over the course of the next 10 minutes. Finally, once they were all removed, the doctor had the talk with the woman about sex education, and that rubber bands were not a successful contraceptive, and not what they meant by wearing a rubber. That is just horrible in so many ways. Not a doctor, but a dental hygienist. I had to explain that brushing your teeth with Comet, the cleaner, was not a good way to clean your teeth to a 40-year-old woman. I also had to tell a woman that was painting her teeth with white fingernail polish that that was a bad idea. A 32-year-old grown man asked me if the hot spells he was experiencing at night meant he was going through menopause. My mother helps the Amish get dental care. One Amish woman complained that she needed new dentures. When asked why she thought so, she replied, "Well, I've lost weight, and you know that when you lose weight, you lose it in your gums first." Doctors and dentists, if you're looking for a community to serve, the Amish can truly use your help. I could write a book about the things I've seen. Why would you think it would be the gums? That's just such a weird and random place. I was a newly minted graduate with fresh and optimistic views on my life as a doctor. Second week in came this old lady and her very dysfunctional family. They would argue and complain about everything, from the food, the nurses they didn't like, and every single medical decision we made. She was very, very sick, so her management was just as complicated. She had several children, and they all didn't like one another and would not talk to one another. Each time, we would have to explain a long update to every single one of them, because
They're entitled to hear it from a doctor.
one of these stories being sitting down and explaining why you don't give Gatorade as an IV drip. They didn't understand why we were giving salt water to her. The conversation with her son went something like this.
Look, she likes Gatorade. She's drinking it, so why can't you give it to her through her drip?
We explain why, and the son frowns.
But it's isotonic.
We explain again.
Yes, but Gatorade has more electrolytes.
We explain again.
Saltwater just seems to be too cheap. Can't you give her something else closer to Gatorade that has electrolytes?
This continues for 2 hours. Wash and repeat every day during her admission. Afterwards, I told my fiance. He opened up a scene from Idiocracy on YouTube, and I just sat there with my mouth open for a while. Yes, you drink Gatorade. You don't inject it directly into the bloodstream. Two very different things. While on dermatological rotation, a Middle Eastern patient saw me with what she described as some funny itching growth on her butt crack. Some quick investigation revealed it to be a severe case of genital warts. I explained the diagnosis and that it was an STD, until she shockingly assured that she was still a virgin. Now, virginity is a big issue for young Muslim women, or perhaps their families even more. But apparently that doesn't cover other types of sex, and therefore no birth control in the form of, say, condoms was needed. EMT here. I had a grown adult trying to explain to me that someone else pooped his pants. Got called out for finger pain at a homeless shelter at 2 a.m. We get there and the guy jumps in the truck with very mild swelling to the tip of his right index finger. Here's how the conversation went. Me. So what happened?
Yeah, I smoked some stuff and then I fell asleep in my bunk and I woke up next to my bunk and my finger hurt and there was poop.
There was poop? Did you fall in poop?
No, like in my pants.
pants. So you pooped your pants.
No, it wasn't me.
So let me get this straight. You smoked something, took a nap, rolled out of your bed in your sleep, hurt your finger, and someone else came along and pooped in your pants before you woke up?
That's what I'm saying. It wasn't me.
My friend, I think you need to take a step back and analyze the situation here. My brother is a general practitioner in rural Tennessee. Enough said, right? He says most of his patients' visits go something like this. Well, person, you're pre-diabetic, have high blood pressure, and are complaining about joint pain. Have you been exercising and cutting out sugar and carbs?
Yeah, I have, Doc, but it doesn't seem to help. Do you have any better meds you could prescribe?
Well, let's talk about your diet. How much water do you drink a day?
I don't like water, as I get extra ice in my sweet tea every day to make sure I get enough water.
My brother explains that that's not enough water by a long shot. How much sweet tea are you drinking every day? Those can have a lot of sugar in them.
Well, I get a large one from Hardee's or McDonald's or wherever on my way to work with my breakfast, and another one on my way home for dinner. Then I have a glass or two when I get home.
Well, that's a lot of sugar, and a lot of fast food if you're eating it twice a day. What do you eat at home?
I don't like to cook, so I usually don't eat anything except those Little Debbie snack cakes at home.
Those have a lot of sugar too.
I thought that all I had to do was cut out Mountain Dew. Now you're saying I can't eat my food or my snacks? What are you suggesting I do? Eat salads for every meal? Why can't you just up my meds?
I relate to this patient's eating habits a little too much, probably. I had to explain to an adult that you have to brush all the sides of your teeth. Like, no, just the side that shows when you smile is not enough. And yes, flossing is not just a thing for rich people. Patient comes in at 2 a.m. for insomnia, clearly tweaking her brains out. Heart rate at 200. Can't sit still, bouncing off the walls. I suggest maybe easing up on the snow.
But doctor, I love the snow.
I was working in GP and had a patient scheduled for an appointment. I looked through his notes to gain an idea of why he may be seeing me, and saw he'd been seen a few times with knee pains and shoulder pains and the like. The guy is in his 70s, so probably just arthritis. I'm thinking I'll do an examination of his sore joints and ask a few questions, prescribe some painkillers, and it'll be a quick one. I call him in and he walks in and sits down and is cheery as anything. What seems to be the problem then, sir? I notice you've had some issues recently with sore joints, I ask him. He then proceeds to tell me about his sore knee. So I check his knee and take a history and it all seems fine. I ask if there's anything else, and he remembers actually his neck is sore too. So I check his neck and nothing untoward to be found there either. At this point, he's like,
okay, well, thanks, Doc. I'll be off then.
I say to him, oh, good. Glad we could help. And you have no other pains at all before you go? He then sits back down and tells me he's been having central crushing chest pain radiating down his left arm and into his jaw since last night, and has been feeling breathless, and when it happened, he had an impending sense of doom. I know a lot of you won't be doctors here, but I'm sure you all recognize the signs of a heart attack there. He had all the classic textbook symptoms. I called the ambulance and he was rushed to the hospital. Sounds like this dude was taking a heart attack like a champ. My dad told me about an extremely religious male patient who was concerned about his nocturnal emissions. He saw it as an offense to God and wanted to know what he could do to stop it. My dad's response?
Well, it's gotta go somewhere, my guy.
Nurse here, retired after 27 years on the job. The number of American 20-somethings that don't know if they're circumcised or not is surprisingly high. When one with urinary tract infection symptoms needs to be given a specimen for testing, I ask, are you circumcised? If not, I have to tell them to pull back the foreskin before peeing in the cup. The number of guys who have asked, what's that, is way too many. For the record, I can count the number who were uncircumcised on 2 hands. This one's from my cousin, who's a doctor. He was in his first year in a clinic, and people went there to have an appointment because he was good looking. Elderly ladies loved him particularly, but this is totally unrelated. And the worst case was when this elderly lady goes in with her granddaughter, around 8 years old. She had a severely infected wound on her head. Upon close inspection, he saw the wound crawling with small maggots and the smell was terrible. He was very upset, of course, and asked why didn't she wash the wound
wound and bring her earlier. She said she thought it would heal with time and was afraid to wash it, lest water enters her brain and kills her. There was also a woman that took her 6-year-old daughter there to check why she still didn't have pubes. You know, old folks are supposed to be wise, but when it comes to medicinal stuff, a lot of the times they're very much behind the curve. What's the most WTF thing you've experienced or seen during a flight? I travel quite a bit and have seen a few weird things, but on a recent trip from Vienna to Venice, things were taken to a whole new level. So we're about 20 minutes into the flight when I noticed that a woman sitting across from me had a Persian cat in one of those cat carrier bags. The plane was really warm and the cat was sitting in the bag panting. Well, the lady decided to let the cat out of the bag to let it cool off a bit. After trying to shove the cat's face up into the air vents for a minute, the cat literally freaked out. It was clawing at everything, attaching itself to the seats in front, jumping around, hissing, well, you name it. This thing went crazy. Anyway, after about 5 minutes of more of the same, the cat completely lost it, tried to climb the seat in front and, wait for it, fell over dead. We couldn't believe what had just happened. The owner was trying to shake the cat around a bit to wake it up, but it was a goner. For the duration of the flight, she was sat there holding her dead cat, sobbing quite profusely. That's just awful. I would be completely paranoid bringing a pet on a plane, and not because of anything like this happening, just in general. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine, I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank masks over her mouth. Apparently, they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? Hey, you're literally out there helping save lives in your sleep. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s, and a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. Yeah, talk about different times. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight, I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay, but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. Apparently, chocolate's very valuable in the air. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back with my younger brother, and the lady that occupied the third seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed poop. To this day, I have no idea how you respond to something like that. Not really a WTF moment, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome, blah blah blah. So we're just leaving Cleveland, we should be in, And then slightly under his breath, but not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says, "Where the hell are we going?" Long pause. "Chicago." Everyone laughed. Good times and high times. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. How are you going to ask me to invest if you're not even going to tell me what I'm investing in? Come on, buddy. I was flying to Denver on Delta in winter 2009, and they were switching from cash to credit only. They just got their brand new machines to swipe cards, and I was one of the first people to test them out. I ordered a 7 and 7, and it was $7. She took my card, swiped it, and the thing that printed out was $0. I left a $3 tip and thought, cool. About 10 minutes later, she came by and asked if I wanted another. I said, sure, why not? I swiped the card, and another $0 transaction. Bought lunch, $0. So I ordered 4 more 7 and 7s and got hammered for around $20 in tips. I checked my bank account the day after and sure enough, only the tip showed up. I have no idea what happened, but that was one happy flight attendant. Sounds like you did pretty well for yourself too, my friend. A guy died next to me once. On a flight from Maui to Dallas, I was half asleep in the second to last row of the plane. While I was listening to music and dozing, I suddenly heard a really loud, hard thud next to me. I look over and there's a man lying on the ground, completely still. I thought maybe he tripped, but the flight attendant came running and he was unresponsive. She frantically ran up and down the aisles asking for doctors. Luckily for him, the flight was full of vacationing doctors and nurses, all of them in ridiculous clothes. Two of the doctors who came back were in Hawaiian shirts and golf attire, and the female nurse who came back was wearing a very strappy, revealing blue Hawaiian print dress. The doctors tried to wake the man up, but he was gone. I was surprised to find out just how much medical equipment they have on commercial flights. The docs whipped out a portable defibrillator and shocked the guy, then set up an IV drip for him. I never heard a word out of him or saw him move. Not sure if he actually woke up or not. Our flight was diverted to LA, and when we landed, half a dozen EMT personnel ran onto the plane to pull the guy out on a gurney. Unfortunately for me, this scenario set off a panic attack, and I had to go find a nice spot in the aisle to lie down so that I didn't pass out and cause more problems for the crew and doctors. It was kind of embarrassing. One time, I was the only person on a very big plane from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then, I've used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get some action from his wife in the seat in front of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline, a passenger sitting next to her pulls out his thing and starts peeing into a bottle, then hands it to the stewardess who didn't even bat an eye. I'm sorry, is there no bathroom on the plane? I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin, Texas. About an hour into the flight, I noticed this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn towards the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she's led to the bathroom. As she's leaving her seat, she poops herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this poop and vomit aroma assaults my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it up as best as they could, but it made no real improvement. Ugh, that's awful to have to sit through, but also just kind of feel bad for that lady. She's obviously having a really rough time. While waiting to use the bathroom on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet, pleasuring himself. At first, I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As his head turned to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point, my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight, and even the next day. Ever since that time, I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when, about halfway through the flight, a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and addresses the situation like a boss. It was Dr. Oz. Oh, great. Is there any other doctor on board? On the way to Japan, I look across the aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and pulls out a large stash of adult magazines and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. I'm sure he says he just reads them for the articles. I was flying Calgary to Houston, which is about a 4-hour direct flight. We were just about 2 hours into the flight, or coincidentally, just about to Denver, when the pilot announced we would have to turn back to Calgary. So around we go and land in about an hour 15. He really cranked it. We touch down and taxi over to the mechanics. They open the cargo door and shut it again. And in 15 more minutes, we were fueled up and in the air and off to Houston. This time it was about a 3-hour flight. full thrust the whole way. Luckily, there was an industry guy behind me and I overheard him speculating the reason. His idea was that since the airline had paid mechanics in Calgary and probably not in Denver, it would be cheaper for them to turn all the way around to Calgary than pay all the costs associated with landing in Denver. Luckily, it was just a little glitch and not a true problem, but it was anyone's guess the true issue. I have a friend that's familiar with the inner workings of the plane, and he said that anytime they open the cargo door and unplug a certain cable during maintenance, some switch has to be flipped to reset the alarm system for that door. He said it's an extremely common mistake for that switch to not get flipped after work has been done, and it results in false alarms. All that cost, likely in the tens of thousands, because one guy forgot to flip a switch. I'd be more annoyed at the waste of time, honestly. Just land in Denver, come on. On a flight a few weeks ago, the flight attendant started to make preparations for landing, telling people to put their trays up and whatnot. I noticed the flight attendant loudly speaking to a man in his late 20s or early 30s sitting 2 rows in front of me. "Sir, you need to put your seat back up. Sir, sir." The guy starts spitting blood and convulsing. It sounded like he was choking on the blood with each gasp of air. The flight attendant starts screaming for help and they make an announcement over the PA for a doctor. 4 passengers and all flight attendants leap into action. Turns out, the lady in the row between me and the sick man is a nurse. Together, they get him laid out in the row with his head in the aisle. He's not responding to their questions and he's fading in and out of consciousness. We make an emergency landing, 20 minutes ahead of schedule. As we're taxiing, he regains consciousness and tells the flight attendant holding his head that he's sorry for the trouble. We land, paramedics meet the plane and carry him off. He seemed to be stable, but I hope everything worked out for the guy. Yeah, that's gotta be a really scary moment for everyone around. Spitting blood and convulsing is not something that you want happening on a plane. This one happened to my cousin. He was flying in South America and about halfway through the flight, he realizes he really needs to go to the bathroom. The plane he's on is a tiny prop plane made for tiny people. He's 6'5". He awkwardly climbs over his aisle mates and stumbles and shuffles to the back of the plane. As he's closing the door, the captain comes on the loudspeaker and warns of upcoming turbulence. He thinks, screw it, I really need to pee. He crams himself into this tiny bathroom and manages to whip it out. And right as he starts to pee, they hit a huge bit of turbulence that knocks him off his feet, backwards, through the bathroom door, and flat on his back in the aisle, still peeing straight up in the air. He was completely mortified and managed to get back up, pick up the door, and work himself back into the bathroom. He waited for like 20 minutes hoping no one would have seen it or that they would have forgotten about it by then, but when he went back out to take his seat, he got a standing ovation from every single person on the plane. Ouch. I feel like this story might be a little bit embellished, but I like the visuals here. I used to travel internationally a lot when I was younger and working for a telecom company designing new infrastructure. On one of the trips as we were heading to China, I looked out the window. We were above Alaska and bearing straight somewhere, and the horizon had a huge slice of black, like some weird wedge-shaped cloud that encompassed half the horizon. It was a bright day on the ground or sea below us. The ice was very bright and white, but there was this giant dark wedge encompassing and seeming to take over the earth as you looked out to the horizon. I had the guys next to me take a look out as well, and they were confused at first too. I was really confused for a few minutes. Then I realized what I was looking at in profile and what that black engulfing wedge really was. It was night. We were flying in such a manner that we were surfing the edge of daytime and nighttime at 35,000 feet. And at that moment, if you looked out over the horizon, you saw daytime fading into night. I only saw it that once. It was being in the right place at the right time. Aside from bad in-flight movies, that would be my most WTF experience. That sounds like that would be absolutely incredible to see. I'd love to see photos of something like that. I'm sure you could find it on Google. The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines. I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down, and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow, the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this, the pilot announces to the rest of the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we're now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. I mean, yeah, you would want that to be the end of the events. You don't want that happening in the air. I was on a flight home from South Africa after a family vacation. My dad is diabetic, but he usually keeps his blood sugar levels pretty regulated, so I never worried before. Mid-flight, I wake up from a nap and see him slumped over the side of his seat. He was taken to the back of the plane where 3 doctors were examining him. They said his heartbeat went up to 220 or something, which I think means he was about an inch from death. All I remember is seeing my mom and brother break down. I began having flashes of life without my father, and it overwhelmed me. I felt sick to my stomach, imagining what life would be like, when all of a sudden his heart rate stabilized. The doctors on board said that it was a miracle, and I felt so much relief. The plane had to stop in Senegal where my dad was transferred to a hospital. He wanted me to keep going since the semester was starting soon. That flight home alone was terrible. I felt the other passengers watching me the entire time. He's all right now, but every time I get on a plane, I remember that feeling of leaving the whole world behind. I was on a flight from Amsterdam to New York one time, and there was this kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, a stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshment cart into the aisle right in front of him, and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry, didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run down the aisle like that," or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Hey, you know what? Someone had to. I went to Vegas with my wife. First, let me say it was an early flight. We got there extra early for check-in, put our bags to the side so as not to get in anyone's way. This 300+ pound greaseball wearing a Hawaiian shirt and shorts comes waddling in with one carry-on bag, remember this as it's important, and knocks over my neatly stacked out-of-the-way baggage. It's also 15 degrees outside, freezing, and 5:15 in the morning. I'm like, whatever, no big deal. Later, we get on the plane. My wife has the window, I'm in the middle, and here comes too fat for the seat Hawaiian guy with his little bag to sit on the end next to me. Great. Believe me when I tell you, this guy smelled like a dead animal covered in throw up and poop. I literally dry heaved when he sat down next to me. The guy had a carry-on bag that he was clenching like it contained something of the utmost importance. Obviously not deodorant. And he was sweating through his thin red flowered shirt while everyone else was bundled in heavy winter jackets. We hadn't even taken off yet, and I was becoming violently ill smelling this guy. I had to stuff my face in my sweater and throw my head into my wife's lap to try and escape the smell. After an hour, the guy became increasingly fidgety and paranoid. This made him sweat more. I can't figure out how a guy who sweated so much was so fat. He was like a walking sauna of used banana hammocks. Finally, the guy got up to use the bathroom, and as soon as he closed the bathroom door, people began ripping cologne and perfume ads out of magazines and rubbing them on his sweat-soaked chair. I kid you not. People were offering their apologies to me for having to sit next to him. And then the stewardess comes over and says, "I'm sorry, the flight is booked. There's nowhere else to put him." And I'm staring at her like, what? I never even said anything to anyone about it. That's when I realized this guy was such a disgusting mess. People were actually rallying around trying to help me. It was the weirdest moment of my life. For the next 5 hours, he made about 20 more trips to the bathroom, and each time, different rows would come over to rub his seat down with cologne. Oh, and guess what was in the bag? Adult magazines. Piles of adult magazines. He took a new one to the bathroom with him each time. I haven't been on a plane since. Yeah, that's gotta be just about the worst person you'd have to sit next to on an airplane. I was on a flight to Chicago. We were supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing, they told us it was too icy and we were diverted to Midway. The two are about 26 miles apart. So we land at Midway, we disembark, and as we're leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take us to O'Hare. We all said, screw it, we'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So About 5 of us out of a full flight of 90 got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane, then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. From the flyer's point of view, this just seems like a complete waste of time. I get that they must need the plane at that airport for something, but come on. Everyone's already deboarded, you got a few people left, just roll with it. The die has been cast. Not my story, but my sister's. She was once on a long-haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night, while everyone was sleeping, suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this wasn't long after 9/11, everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. Hey, come on, it's not her fault. She has no control over that. I get that you guys would be annoyed, but come on, give her a break. Redditors who have caught their significant other cheating, how did you catch them? Did you give them another chance? We went to a Halloween party at a friend's place. I'd known she's had a bit of a crush on one guy who was to attend. At one point late in the night, she was quite drunk. She lined up at the washroom immediately after he went in. I kept a bit of an eye on her, and when the bathroom door opened, she went in, but he didn't come out. I stood at the door and waited. When it opened and he stumbled out, I immediately went in and confronted her about it. I'm proud of myself for not committing murder that night. We're going through divorce now. 10 years married with 2 kids. Really? You're gonna do it at a mutual friend's party in the bathroom? That's just got bad idea written all over it. I didn't catch him. He called me the next morning crying and told me everything. I respected his honesty, recognized his remorse, and truly believed it would never happen again. So I decided to forgive him. But after he cheated, he became incredibly paranoid. He started checking my phone, accusing me of revenge screwing people behind his back. Even got mad when I was assigned to work with a man on a group project in school. I couldn't stand by the fact that he was the one who'd cheated and I was the one being punished. I really had forgiven him. I wasn't holding his mistake over his head, and my attitude toward him didn't change after the fact at all, but he was driving me away more and more every day. After about a month of this, I broke up with him and he completely lost it. Sounds like this was a hitch in the relationship that you guys just weren't going to get through, one way or the other. I met my future husband when I was 15 years old. By the time I was 20, we were married, and I was pregnant with my first child. At 22, I gave birth to our second child, and that's when things changed. Suddenly, he was never home. He would leave the house to pick up milk and return at 5 a.m. He was drinking so heavily that most mornings he'd wake up in a panic, wondering where he'd left his car, only to find it in the driveway. Luckily, he'd never killed anyone driving home while blackout drunk. My husband had wanted to be a writer, so I would constantly find half-written stories or story outlines in these hardcover journals. He left them everywhere, and I'd pick them up and pile them on his desk. One night, I'm getting ready to host a party for my father's 50th birthday. The hall was already booked and I had already decorated. We were expecting about 80 guests. I was quickly trying to get ready and out the door as I had to be there before guests started arriving, but I could not find my pantyhose anywhere. While rummaging through our dresser drawers, I found them, along with another one of his hardcover journals. I opened it up and scanned a page wondering why this particular book was stashed in a drawer. As I read what was on the pages, my entire world was crashing down on me. Not only was my husband an alcoholic, he also had a pretty serious drug addiction. Then the worst part hit me. He was having an affair with my best friend. She was my maid of honor, my best friend since we were 10 years old. I ran to the washroom and threw up. I just couldn't handle the information I'd just gotten. I quickly finished getting ready and left the house. I hosted that party that night with both my husband and my best friend in attendance, and did so with a smile on my face. It was a tough night, but I survived. We've since gotten divorced, and I no longer have contact with either of them. Yeah, a lot of red flags there, unfortunately. Going out for milk and not coming back till 5 a.m.? I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need some answers. And the worst part is, he was cheating with your best friend. He was my first proper boyfriend, and in hindsight, he was a pretty crappy boyfriend. But at the time, I thought the sun shone out of his butt. So I was crushed when out of the blue he dumped me, with no reason. A week later, a group of his friends who'd taken a liking to me contacted me with the real reason for our breakup, because apparently they'd seen what was happening and they were sick of his crap. Basically, he'd been seeing another girl behind my back, and when she found out about me, she refused to sleep with him. So he dumped me in the hopes of getting into her pants. She inevitably told him to get lost, at which point he tried getting back with me. I did not take him back. I found out while I was deployed. The guy she was cheating on me with emailed me and told me everything, every detail. He apologized and told me he had no idea we were together. I put a hole in the wall, went to smoke an entire pack at the smoke pit, went back to my laptop, and I thanked the guy. You gotta at least respect the guy for coming to you and letting you know. If he honestly didn't know she was with someone, at least he's doing what he can to try and make it right. My girlfriend was out with a friend, we'll call her Susan, on a girls' night until all hours, and told me she was staying at Susan's place for the night. The next time I see Susan, she pulled me aside and told me that they actually went to the house of a guy my girlfriend worked with. We'll call him Patrick, because that's his name. Susan goes on to tell me that she woke up in the middle of the night and found my girlfriend fooling around with Patrick on the couch, while Patrick's girlfriend was asleep in the bedroom. I thanked her for letting me know, then went home and told my girlfriend to pack her stuff. I kinda hope someone told Patrick's girlfriend too. The whole situation is messed up, but she was in the house. My ex-wife and I were together for 6 years, married for 2.5 of them. She worked in a hospital and started getting a little too buddy-buddy with a doctor. I confronted her about it and she assured me he was just a friend, and tried to make me sound crazy. She even had this idea in that she could convince or trick me into being friends with him so that she could be with him without me being suspicious. I did everything I could to get her to talk to me, but she never would. It's a very long, sad, and messed up tale. Eventually, all her lies started making less and less sense. I found a program that would decipher text messages and picture messages from an iTunes backup of her phone. It had all the evidence I needed. I still can't shake all the texts, images, and general disrespect of our marriage and family that I discovered. We have a 2-year-old together after all. This was a little over a year ago, and I still have serious bouts of depression over it. The day I found out, I texted the picture he had sent of his junk to both him and her. She came home sobbing and trying her best to convince me to try our marriage again. I could never trust her again, nor did I want to try, but for a while, I thought that maybe I should give it a chance. That was a waste of a couple months of my life. She refused to change jobs or stop contacting him, even with the threat of losing her family looming over her head. I made the hardest decision of my life, that it would be better for my daughter to grow up in 2 separate homes where she didn't need to witness her parents constantly fighting her in tears. I share 50-50 custody of her with my ex-wife, which saddens me deeply because I can't see her as much as I want, but it's better than her growing up in a household full of lies and deceit. Throughout the ordeal, I lost 30 pounds from constant stress and depression. I learned that people don't change. Selfish people will always be selfish people. I did, however, receive the amazing gift of a child from it all though, and I would never change that. That's really rough to hear, my friend. That's probably the worst part, is that when that trust is gone, it's almost impossible to get back. And it sounds like your wife wasn't really putting in any work to get there either. I was deployed in Iraq and my wife was being distant for a few weeks. During my deployment, she mentioned several times in phone calls this contractor she was working with and how much they click and all. I trusted her and never thought that she was cheating, but I joked about it and we laughed it off. I even met the guy while home on leave and he shook my hand, thanking me for my service. A month later, I'm back in Iraq, and one particular night I can't get a hold of her. I called and no answer. I'm very much a trust my gut type of guy, and I had a sinking, sickly feeling of something being up. I never was one of checking or sneaking into her accounts, but we shared passwords with each other. I decided to check her Facebook account. There was nothing in her inbox, but there was one lonely message in her outbox she didn't delete to the contractor guy she worked with, saying, "I will always love you." That was when my world came crashing down. down. Shortly afterwards, she finally calls me back, not knowing I know, and confesses she's pregnant with his baby. I couldn't get a hold of her because she was with her mom confessing what she had done. That night, I remember punching a wall and straining or broke my thumb, and leaving my barracks knocking over a porta potty. Thankfully, nobody was in it. There was a month or two before I was to be home, and we tried working it out being distant. Once I got home, I decided to give it another chance. She told me she would stop talking to him and request him to be removed from her project. I met her at the office one day for lunch, and she wasn't in her office yet. While waiting for her, I saw she had her email pulled up, but not her usual email. Turns out she had a secret email account with him. After that, I was done and out. The one thing some people don't know is that there can be layers to unravel when your significant other is cheating. My doubts started when I took my significant other's phone on accident, unlocked it, and bam, texts that were pretty inappropriate. I confronted her about it and she tried to talk her way out of it, but they were just texts, so I told her to stop doing it and everything would be fine. Unfortunately, I found out in a pretty annoying way. I was chilling at home and I get a message from a really good friend if I wanted to go play laser tag. We're in college and it's what bored college kids do. I decline and just go about my evening. The next day, I'm talking to that exact friend and he lets me know that my significant other and this other guy, the guy that she was sending the text to and that everyone else also knew, were being a little bit too close. I confronted her and bingo, she was cheating on me. Ended soon after that. A surprise visit from out of town. She's not home. Well, it was a surprise and I wasn't sure of her plans for the evening. So I go to my mom's house to wait a while. A few hours later, I go back to my girlfriend's apartment, but she's still not there. On a hunch, I drive by her male friend's place and sure enough, her car is there. I get an uncomfortable feeling about it, but try not to worry. So I go back to my mom's place to get some sleep. Up early, I go over to my girlfriend's again. Not there. Drive around the block and she's still at that dude's place. I never liked that jerk. At this point, I'm angry. I go back to my mom's and call my girlfriend's home phone. The message was something like this: I came into town last night and we need to talk. A few hours later, she rings the doorbell and we go upstairs. She confesses that she cheated. I was in love with this woman, so I accepted her apology and gave her another chance. We stayed together for a few months, but I came to realize I couldn't forgive her so easily, especially since she was still hanging around that guy. So we broke up. The end. When they're caught and they're not willing to cut off contact with the person that they were caught with, there's definitely going to be problems. They can't seriously expect you to sit there and just be okay with you continuing to spend time with them. I'd been dating a guy for a few months. We didn't have a title on it, but a couple months before the incident, we had decided that we had no interest in seeing others and we were exclusive. He decides he wants to buy an iPad, and a few days later, I asked if I could see it to see what apps he had, and if there were any I might like to put on my own. I noticed an app called Meet Me that has around 5 or 6 notifications on it. I honestly had no idea what it was, so I opened it. It went straight to his inbox, which was full of messages from other women. Just as I saw that, he asked if I was ready to go to the grocery store, so I left it there. He could tell something was up at the grocery store, but I didn't bring it up in public, obviously. We get back to his place and I open up the app again. I said, "What's this app on here called Meet Me? I've never heard of that before." He said,
Oh, it's just a social networking site, kind of like Facebook. It's really big with my friends from up in Oregon.
So I open up a message that says something like, "Hey girl, you want to come see me so I can play with those tatas?" Or something along those lines. I said, "Oh, so this blonde girl Shelly is gonna fly all the way from Oregon so you can play with her tatas? How sweet of her." Then we get into a huge fight, with him mostly claiming that I'm not his girlfriend so he can still do things with other girls, seemingly forgetting about the exclusivity talk. It ends with him confessing that he did it because he's in love with me and those strong feelings scared him, so he turned to other women, but he never actually met up with any of them. He also cried, so that was cool. I gave him another chance, but we crashed and burned not too long afterwards because I just couldn't trust that sketchy jerk. That's one of the worst, most popular excuses for cheating I've ever heard. It's just stupid when you think about it. The fact that people think that this is a legitimate excuse just shows how stupid they are. My ex just started grad school after being out of undergrad for about 2 years. We'd been going out for nearly a year. She would introduce me to a lot of her classmates and stuff, and we'd start to hang out with some of them. The people she had made the best friends with were guys, which I didn't have too much of a problem with. Most of them seemed cool. One of the guys she was probably the closest with, and she started talking about this guy all the time. He had just gotten married a couple months prior, I guess. I had met him a few times, and I got just a bit of a jerk vibe from him, but whatever. A couple weeks go by and she just starts to act different. It's our anniversary weekend and I have dinner plans for us. Get a nice card, all that kind of stuff. She has to cancel on me at the last minute because she has to study. That weekend, I stay at her apartment because I need to do something downtown the next day, and I wasn't living around there. She ended up having to go to her parents' house for some reason. She left her laptop and I took it to go on Gmail. Her Gmail was logged in, and I know I really shouldn't have done it, but I started to poke around just a little. I felt terrible while doing it, but I could feel some distance between us and she wouldn't talk to me about whatever it was. She had deleted the majority of her Gchat conversations, but must have overlooked one of them. It was a quite obscene conversation with that married guy about what they had done that weekend and many other times before that. So I took the card I had gotten for her, wrote F you all over the words, telling her how I had loved her, and set it on her computer with that conversation still open, and left. That's it? No follow-up? I guess she just came home and found that and put it all together and decided to let it go? My first boyfriend cheated on me with his ex at least twice, but I didn't actually find out until years after we broke up. He and I got together for drinks and to catch up, and I just flat out asked him if he'd slept with her. He couldn't answer me, and that answer was enough. Looking back, I knew in the back of my mind something was up, and I should have accepted that and moved on sooner. The paintings she did of him, the way he'd disappear for days after seeing her, heck, he even drove to my school in her car to tell me we should take a break. Ugh. It makes me angry to think about how naive I was. I was trying to be the cool girlfriend who didn't mind her boyfriend hanging out with his ex because they were just friends. Joke's on me, I guess. My ex-boyfriend and I had been dating for 2 years when he cheated on me. It was his birthday and we were supposed to be going out for dinner that night. I decided to surprise him with his birthday present earlier that day. I went over to his house since he was off from work and saw that he had left the door unlocked. So I went in and called out for him, but he didn't answer. His TV volume was turned up really loud, so I went up to his room just to catch him pile driving my cheer captain. There was no confrontation. I left quietly, though I did come back to stick nails in his tires out of spite. He begged me to forgive him, but I declined. I won't lie, I was tempted, but it really hurt. To give him everything, and I mean everything I could emotionally, and he was my first, for him to turn around and betray me like that really hurt. I will say that holding grudges did me no good. I was able to forgive him just for closure purposes. When it comes to forgiving someone for something like this, that's more what it's for. It's for you. You need to be able to move on. And it's hard to do that when you're still holding on to those feelings. My roommates in college confronted her after they knew she had someone over while I was out of town. She convinced them that she would tell me what had happened. After I returned and 24 hours passed, my roommates told me because they let her have her time. I kicked her out immediately and ended it. About a month later, she moved into the same building, same floor across the hall. Her door was about 8 feet from mine. It's a college town with tens of thousands of apartments. And no, it was not to see me. We talked once after the breakup, and it was truly over. That's incredibly awkward to have to be across the hall from each other after all of that. My wife had been acting distant for a few weeks, and suddenly started meeting a female friend of hers a night a week or so. I was suspicious, especially when the friend called looking for her on a night that they were supposed to be out together. A few nights later, I found some pictures and text messages on her phone. We argued, and I ended up going to my buddy's house at 3 in the morning. God bless him. The next day, we argued some more, and of course it was my fault. After all, I didn't pay her enough attention. We went to counseling, and I stayed because of our kids, but I've never forgiven her, and honestly, I wonder if staying was a mistake. The marriage was rocky once he met a girl in his summer session course and was studying with her while I was gone at work. Sometimes she'd come early in the morning, like 6 a.m., and then be there when I got home at 9 p.m. He would make her breakfast, lunch, and dinner with the groceries I was buying for us with my hard-earned money. I put my foot down and said that he had to limit his time with her, that my needs weren't being met. He was withholding sex for weeks at the time, citing that he was too tired or stressed. He said I was overreacting, that nothing was happening between them, and that I was just trying to sabotage his career goals. I read his chats with her, and he was pouring his heart out about our troubles, but there was no evidence of cheating. I sent him to sleep on the futon the day I came home from work to have lunch and found them boxing in the backyard shirtless. In the following months, I tolerated none of his crap. But what really got me was when I happened upon a pros and cons list comparing me to his ex, his study buddy, and some other girl I hadn't even heard of yet. I also found love letter drafts to 2 girls thrown in the trash, not even hidden. Needless to say, I ended it right quick and kicked him out. I was actually pretty merciful and let him live in the garage for 3 weeks, but he definitely didn't deserve it. Last I heard, he's dating the 3rd girl on the list and living with his study buddy. Jerk. This sounds like it has nothing to do with you and more with him just not knowing what he wants. Sadly, a lot of the times that's the way it goes. It's not the person who got cheated on that has anything wrong with them. It's the person who did the cheating. What's the most significant "you just messed with the wrong person" moment you've witnessed or experienced? I stopped in Reno overnight while moving across the country. Had everything I own in a little beater I bought for the trip. All night, I'm keeping an eye on the parking lot. There's a cop car in the lot. Sure enough, late that night, I see a shady guy walking slowly along the line of parked cars, scoping them out. To my surprise, he decides the cop car is the one he wants to break into. So he takes off his shirt, wraps it around his arm, and starts hitting the window with his forearm. I call the front desk and let them know what's going on. The lady says she's calling the cops. I tell her it's a cop car he's trying to break into, and ask if there's a cop staying in the hotel. She says that she'll check. About 30 seconds later, a very angry man in his boxers thunders out of his room and tackles the dude. He messed with the wrong person. Why of all the cars would he decide that the cop car was the one to break into? That just sounds like a bad plan from the start. My father recently told me a story about this jerk who he works with driving trucks for different distributors. They have no smoking areas because of food productions and things like that, but this jerk decided to smoke there anyway, putting his butts out in a styrofoam cup. Anyway, after a while, his truck was loaded and he decided to just throw the cup out the window after getting his truck, when a man walked past and asked him calmly to pick up the cup and put it in the bin. To which this intellectual giant of a driver says, "If it's so important, why don't you put it in the bin?" before driving off. Without making much of a reaction, he picked it up, walked to the bin, then makes his way back inside. When my father gets back to the main truck depot, he sees this driver getting yelled at by his boss. Turns out there was a conference being held with some overseas members of the company and the CEO. The CEO whom was told to pick up the cup. They instantly barred the driver from the site and all associated sites, and my father's boss had to jump through hoops to not lose the contract renewal. I can't imagine the level of ecstasy that CEO would have felt during the whole situation, knowing that this prick doesn't know who he is. When I was a senior in high school, I was at some house party. There was this chick named Rachel there, a notoriously crazy girl who was known for causing trouble anywhere she went. She was also a pretty big girl, maybe 5'9" with broad shoulders. Anyway, out of nowhere, she just starts screaming at another girl, Sarah, a shorter, skinny thing, who was honestly on the other side of the room doing absolutely nothing. Rachel gets up in her face, starts cussing her out, and pushing her multiple times, obviously just trying to start something for the heck of it. Rachel finally decides to throw a punch, and I kid you not, like a flash of lightning, Sarah just launches at Rachel, starts beating the crap out of her face, knocks her on her butt, and strongholds Rachel's hair and starts slamming her skull on the brick fireplace in the house. I think she must have knocked Rachel out for a minute, because Sarah decided she was done and just stood up and walked away. Turns out Sarah's older sister was a competitive female boxer, and showed her a thing or two about fighting. Lesson learned, just because they're small doesn't mean they can't beat the crap out of you. There's this old, miserable looking man with a nickel who seems to just ride the subway all day. The nickel man only seems to have one purpose in his life. He sticks out his hand with a nickel on his palm and he just points it at you. It's like he's asking for you to look at his plain old nickel. He's like a reverse panhandler. One night, I was coming home drunk and saw the nickel guy. He was doing his usual rounds and he came to me. He stuck out his hand and like usual, you just let him be. But I was tipsy and I pulled the nickel out of his hand. Within seconds, he went from normal nickel guy to crazy rip your face off yelling angry gorilla man. Once I put it back, he became normal nickel guy again. I was mortified. The nickel's obviously very important to him. He just wants to show it off. One night during my junior year of high school, some of my buddies came by and asked if I wanted to go party with them. I didn't know the person throwing the party, but I said screw it and went with them anyway. It turned out to be one of the most surreal nights of my life. We got there and only knew a handful of people out of the 50 or so people that were there. There were a lot of people from different schools, so I knew that eventually something was going to happen. Soon after, one kid, we'll call him Ron, pulls out a piece and starts bragging about how his parents bought it for him and no one should mess with him. Then he starts pointing it at people to show off the laser sight on it. The guy throwing the party, we'll call him John, saw this and told him to stop pointing it at people. Ron said something like, "Screw off, don't tell me what to do, I do what I want." It got a little heated, but then it all seemed to get worked out and Ron put it away. About 5 minutes later, Ron had the piece out again, and trying to be slick and prove he was a bad boy, pointed it right at John's back. When he did, John just happened to turn and saw Ron pointing it at him. I don't remember his exact words, but John said something to the effect of, "Oh, you want to mess with me? I'll be right back." He started jogging to the house. We were in the front yard. And I told my friends, we need to leave. This is about to get crazy. While John was jogging to the house and while he was inside, Ron seemed confident at first. But then he realized he'd gotten himself in a terrible situation and started to walk quickly to his car. John was not far behind, however, with a much bigger piece of his own. Ron got to his car and got in, but he was blocked in and couldn't move. John walked up to the car and tapped on the window. Ron cracked the window about an inch and was crying, probably begging for his life. All while John calmly talked to him. I couldn't hear what was said, but I did hear John finally say, "Stop crying, you look like a real wuss." He started to walk away, but then all of a sudden he stopped, turned around, and fired at Ron's face from about 8 to 10 feet away. We all thought for sure that we had just witnessed a murder and scattered like roaches when you turn the lights on. I remember looking back and seeing John calmly walking back into the house while everyone was running around him. That was what freaked me out the most. His calmness. Turns out Ron lived, and John was charged with attempted murder and a few other things. Ron had reconstructive surgery to repair some of the damage, but he was badly disfigured. I don't remember if John was found guilty or not, but I do remember hearing that Ron won a settlement from John's family. He bought a new Cadillac and whatever else he wanted, but he was super depressed about his disfigured face and got hammered constantly. He died in a single car drunk driving accident not too long after. I'll never forget that night. That got insanely out of control. Those are not toys. You don't just wave them around. And you definitely don't use them unless it is absolutely necessary. I live in front of a hospital parking lot. Some guy in an expensive car cut in line. A lady in a van was super peeved and kept honking. He got out to calm her down. She got out, ripped off her wig, and started screaming and pointing at the cancer center entrance. He looked like he wet himself and got back in his car. Still stayed where he'd cut in line though. My father and his brother, who were both 6'6", were riding in my uncle's tiny little Chevette, and a guy got road rage and chased them into a parking lot. You could almost see the guy fill his pants when they unfolded themselves out of the car. My dad always tells me this story of how you should never get out of your car after a road rage incident. My mom and him were driving to the city when another driver didn't give my dad the right of way. He almost crashed into my parents, and my mom was pregnant at the time. So of course my dad was angry out of his mind. My dad, being a pretty big dude, wasn't exactly someone to mess with, but out of the little car that almost crashed into my parents, got a man that my dad described as a freaking giant. Dad quickly got back in the car and kept driving. He always gets embarrassed when he tells the story, because my mom still laughs at the face he made when that giant got out of his tiny car. Two drunk guys were bugging this local busker, trying to get him to fight them, saying all sorts of racist stuff. The busker was black. The busker just lost it. Obviously, he had to deal with a ton of drunk jerks. He picked up his guitar and hit one of the drunk guys across the face with it. I called the police when I saw it, and later got called in to give evidence against the drunk guys, who got arrested, saying that they started it. I mean, hey, you got what you asked for. I was covering a hockey game as a sports reporter when I saw the single best retaliation of my life. In my state, if you're female and you want to play hockey with the boys, you can. Typically, the serious girl hockey players will play in these leagues because the girls-only hockey leagues are kinda crap. There was this girl named Alex who I covered since she was a freshman, and she was really good. She'd played since she was a kid, was on some really good travel teams, competed in national camps, got a college scholarship for the sport, and played 4 years in college. Anyway, during her junior year, I'm covering an away game at this crappy arena, and her school is playing one of its rivals, so I know it's going to be a chippy game. It did not disappoint. This big tough boy notices she's a girl, or had played against her before, and spends the first 2 periods basically trying to intimidate her by checking her hard into the boards whenever she has the puck, and generally doing all the things you know someone is doing to antagonize you. Now, I've seen this girl play, and I know she isn't going to tolerate that, so I just sit and wait for the moment that she snaps. It comes in the 3rd period. The jerk comes running full speed from one side of the ice to the other and gives her one of the worst cheap shot checks I've ever seen. She hits the boards hard, lands on the ice, and the crowd yells because the refs either didn't see it or didn't care, and the play breaks the other way, so everyone else is moving away from them. She doesn't miss a beat though. Calmly, I watch her pick herself up, and the jerk hockey player must have said something to her to cause her to snap, because she takes her helmet off and goes his way. At this point, I can tell he thinks he's going to dismiss this sweet little girl and tell her to play with dolls or something, but he never gets the chance. She socks him right in the jaw and starts beating the crap out of him. It was absolutely amazing. He must have had maybe 50 pounds on her, but she didn't care and beat his butt handily. And because the refs were on the other side of the ice, it took a little bit of time to break them up. She got ejected, he got ejected, but he sulked out of the arena knowing full well he got his butt kicked by a girl. It was phenomenal. 2 kids about 11 years old were bullying this 9-year-old kid by instigating their little sister to go hit and kick him, with the threat that they would beat him up with a hockey stick if he retaliated. The poor 9-year-old pleaded with them to stop, but when they wouldn't, he charged the kid with the hockey stick, took it from him, chased them off, and threw the stick over the fence, then continued to saunter home. I witnessed this from about 50 feet away at age 13. It took place in about a minute, and while I was contemplating a way to help the kid out, he just took matters into his own hands like a G. That kid was not one to mess with. When I was about 10 or so, there was a cricket in my house that I shot with a Nerf gun from a prone position. It dodged it, then jumped at me, and I got up in a panic so fast, the gun flung from my hand into the kitchen, breaking a few glasses. I never messed with crickets again. Didn't you know? Crickets are vicious, dude. I was working in a sketchy part of Albuquerque when I realized a guy was following me through the parking lot. I started walking faster, and so did he. I knew I wasn't going to get to my car before he reached me, so I took a knife out of my purse and turned around and shoved it in his face and yelled, "I'm from Wisconsin, I can gut a deer!" The dude took off, and I got in my car shaking. That's a really scary moment. I'm glad you were able to defend yourself and got away safely. I lost it at a Subway a while back. This story isn't about me losing it at a person myself, but I found someone who could and did. The Subway I go to is inside a skating rink, and on this day, it was flooded with newly pubescent boys thinking that treating people like absolute crap is how you act like a macho man. One girl behind the counter was near tears, and the other woman was trying to hold her own ground against a bunch of around 13-year-olds. It was stuff like, "You witch, I didn't ask for mayo. Are you blind? For crap's sake, that's not toasted enough. When I get a job, I'm gonna be making more than you." Just a taste of some of what I heard. So I went out to the lobby of the skating rink and found a woman nearby and asked her if she was with the boys in Subway, which she was, and then I told her to follow me. The look on the boys' faces when she let out her angered screech after listening to them was friggin' priceless. She made the boys pay for their own food. One boy didn't even get to finish making his sandwich, with the woman saying, "Wrap it up how it is and he'll pay for it." And from what I gathered as she practically dragged them out of there was the boys who weren't hers, she was going to speak to their parents, followed by strong protests as she told them to pack their crap, as she was taking them home early. I left the girls at Subway a nice tip and they gave me a cookie. Never mess with an angry mom. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that moment. That's gotta be the worst kind of jerk there is. The group of 13-year-olds who think they've just got the world figured out and that they're better than you even though they have not accomplished anything. Their kryptonite is their mother, and I love watching that moment. When I played hockey, I got kicked out of a game early, so I had to watch it from the stands. A guy from the other team was chasing one of my teammates around the ice, slashing him, trying to get him to fight. Finally, my buddy dropped his gloves and proceeded to give this dude a man-sized butt whooping. That teammate went on to become an enforcer in the NHL. We're getting a lot of hockey stories today, but I guess that is the one sport where you're technically allowed to fight the other team. After drinking and partying in the haunch outside our base in Japan, my friend and I went to the on-base taxi stand to go back to the barracks. We hail and start climbing into the first open cab we see. This drunken white guy was running for it, but we beat him to it, and we didn't even see him. Anyway, he's furious and starts yelling at us. 2 girls, 1 Latina, the other black. "You stupid friggin' N-word!" And then a group of about 6 black sailors come around the corner to the stand. I don't know how it happened. Maybe Paul Mooney summoned them. Anyway, white guy changed his mind and ends up walking/running to the ships. A fight didn't end up breaking out, but he came really close to getting his butt whooped. I work at a restaurant and 4 punks decided to dine and ditch. They ran out and got away, but luckily I overheard one of their names while they were eating. Long story short, I tracked him down on Twitter, and the direct messages went like this. Me. Haha, nice try. We know who you are. You owe us $40. Bring the money or we're reporting you to the police and your school. You have until Sunday night. 1 minute later. I'm terribly sorry for this horrible incident. I'm bringing the money right now. I'm terribly sorry. It wasn't even my idea. I had no choice but to run also, or else I'm in trouble. We left the bag of money. 15 minutes later after I sent the message, a guy literally opened the front door and threw a Ziploc bag full of $40 of cash and change into the restaurant and ran away. Tools. I bet they thought it was real friggin' funny at the time, too. I work in a law office and regularly have to file documents with the court. I've learned from watching one interaction not to mess with the clerks at the filing window. A lot of people probably don't know or wouldn't believe how detailed the rules are for submitting documents to the court. There are rules regarding the type of paper you can use, the exact spacing of the heading on the paper, the exact measurements of the 2-hole punches at the top of the sheet, all kinds of things. There are literally dozens of rules on how to format your filings. In my experience, these rules are rarely enforced. The clerks will reject documents if there are major errors, missing signatures, or filled out incorrectly, things like that. But will usually let things slide like your 2-hole punches not being precisely 2 3/4 inches apart. But there was one day where I saw a clerk take sweet revenge against someone who had it coming. I was standing in line waiting to file something, and a notoriously huge jerk of an attorney got called up to the window. The clerk asked him something like, "I'm really sorry, Mr. Jerk, but you're missing some attachments to this form." He reacts as if she had just stood from her chair, flipped him the bird, and went and pooped on his mom's grave. He starts yelling about how she didn't know what the heck she was doing, and that a trained monkey could do her job. that he would complain to her supervisor, and on and on and on. He goes stomping away, and she looks much calmer than you would expect for someone who just got reamed out by this enormous jerk. I get called up to her window and say something like, "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." She replies, "It's fine, he's on my list now." I'm curious, so I ask what she means. Her response was fantastic. She says, "Mr. Jerk handles a lot of family law cases. He'll be wanting to file things here, and his paperwork is bound to land on my desk. For people like him, I get out the formatting sections of the rules of court, and I make sure he's followed every one of them." She points to my filing and says, "Your 2 hole punches look off. You see how one is higher than the other? There's supposed to be a certain distance from the top of the page. I'm not going to reject yours, but next time he drops something off at the filing box, you better believe I'm going to bust out my ruler." I let her know that I think that's awesome. But once he's seen the reason his document was rejected, he'll just have an assistant fix it or whatever. She replies, "We don't have to tell him why it was rejected specifically, just that it violated some rule of formatting. He can figure that out for himself if he ever wants to have another document filed." She looked so happy. This woman has got to be one of the most petty, evil, conniving people I've ever heard of. I want to travel the world with her. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories linked at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot, linked in the description as well. Either way, thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.